Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable. See playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 2901, Black Pool. A white cocoon of light floated in the darkness of the tomb. This cocoon wrapped around Elvenia. Every a few seconds, the cocoon could be seen beating with the naked eye. Dong, dong, the movement of the cocoon caused tremors to pass through the dark cave. The blood vessels and the flesh on the wall and the ground bulged as if they were sentient living beings, and gathered around the cocoon. Dong, dong, the cocoon had beaten over 100 times before some of the blood vessels attached themselves to it, the flesh following close behind. The entire process was long and slow, but they continued to gradually gather together into a shape. Zen didn't know that such a strange change was taking place in the dark cave. He waited for a few hours before he began to feel that the light was dimming. The pig-faced monsters that had been near him had gradually fallen into the darkness. The effect of the darkness fruit was about to disappear. "Are you going to use me as bait?" Zen asked the pig-faced monster that was guarding him. "Right," the pig-faced monster snickered. "I'm afraid I'm going to disappear from the dark region before that because the darkness fruit is about to lose effect," Zen said. The pig-faced monster looked surprised. They had forgotten that Zen was not from the dark region. When the effect of the darkness fruit wore off, the dark region would erase his body. The pig-faced monster reported this to its superiors. Soon, several pig-faced monsters had left the valley. Zen felt it getting darker and darker, the voices of the pig-faced monsters becoming fainter by the minute. He felt pain as the dark region continued to corrode him. Fortunately, there were a number of darkness fruits in the dark region. About an hour later, the pig-faced monsters returned and shoved a darkness fruit into Zen's mouth. As the power of the darkness fruit spread out across Zen's body, the darkness faded away and things returned to normal. "I wouldn't eat the darkness fruit if I were you," Zen's guard said meaningfully. "Why?" Zen asked curiously. "It's better to be corroded by the darkness than to be bait," the guard said with a grin. Zen wanted to shrug but the bronze iron plates were pressing down on his shoulders, restricting his movements. Zen hadn't given up despite the numerous changes that had come about. He wasn't about to take the guard's words to heart and he had no other choice but to stay strong. 8 hours later, the guard gave Zen another darkness fruit. It was then that the tentacles in the triangle caves began to emerge in succession. Zen could now see the tentacles completely and what they were. A wrinkled round head sat at the top of the tentacles. The creature looked like an octopus, but it had many more tentacles. The pig-faced monsters aren't strong or as big as the black monkeys. The octopuses are obviously more powerful. So why do these two creatures live together? Why do the octopuses obey the pig-faced monsters? Zen thought. It was common for creatures to live together, but usually, only those creatures that complemented each other did so. What made the pig-faced monsters special? They weren't of great wisdom and strength. How was it that they were now commanding the octopuses? What happened next helped Zen understand this. One of the octopuses stretched out its tentacles and grabbed the ropes attached to the bronze iron plates. It then pulled Zen along with the iron plates and began to climb up the valley. Halfway through, it stretched out its tentacles yet again and got entangled with the octopus below it. Each tentacle was over 1,000 feet long. The octopuses connected with each other using their tentacles. Only one of them remained in its cave. The octopuses couldn't really leave the caves. If they really wanted to, it was a long drawn-out process that was troublesome. Moreover, the range of their activities was limited. No wonder there are so few living creatures in this area. They must have been wiped out by the octopuses. But the octopuses can only move around a certain distance. So it must have been the pig-faced monsters that do the rest. Zen was still deep in thought when the long rope made of tentacles scaled the peak of the mountain, and a strange smell reached Zen's nose. Zen looked down to see the black pool that the pig-faced monsters had mentioned. There was no water in the pool. Instead, it was filled with sticky black mud that was so dense. No wave could ever be created on its surface no matter how hard the wind was blowing. Whoosh! The octopuses, which were part of the rope, lowered Zen onto the surface of the black pool. Moments before Zen was about to hit the surface, the octopuses tossed him into the pool. The black mud was so viscous that people could even stand on it with no fear of sinking. But because of the heavy bronze iron plates on his back, Zen began to sink slowly into the mud. In no time, Zen's whole body had sunk into the depths of the pool. He could see nothing in the black quagmire, and could do nothing but let himself sink. Minutes later, Zen felt something tug at his back. The rope had tightened and was stopping Zen from sinking even further. He was alone in the black pool, hanging onto the rope and his luck. Plop, plop, bubbles began to float. Zen frowned, sensing that something was coming his way. As more bubbles began to appear, he felt a stabbing pain in his feet, as if something was stuck to them. He struggled to escape it, but his body was being held down by the bronze iron plates. Thanks to the absence of enough space, he couldn't get rid of it. The more he struggled, the more things he attracted to himself. It was not long before these things spread out all over his body. What the heck? Zen couldn't see anything. All he could do was grit his teeth and endure the pain. He finally understood what the pig-faced monster had meant. The monster had been right when it had said that being put in the black pool and sucked by these unknown objects was worse than dying. Dorothy and the others were witnessing something horrifying happen to Zen. Countless tiny holes appeared on Zen's body, ringed with black traces of erosion. Chapter 2902, New Body After Rebirth. These are from severe poison, Dorothy said after looking at the corrosion marks. The wounds one sustained from the other shore carried over to the source world. Thus, Zen sported the dark, corrosion marks on his skin. However, any objects from the other shore could not appear in the source world, so there was no venom around his wounds. Letitia was immediately relieved upon hearing Dorothy's diagnosis. Zen is immune to poison. It appears so, Dorothy replied upon observation. The things in the black pool were extremely poisonous. Most of the creatures from the dark region could barely come out alive if getting bit after being thrown into that pond. Death came slowly with this type of poison. After being injected into the bloodstream, it would make the victim hallucinate while his body deteriorated. Pus would slowly fester on his skin, his organs, down to his very bones until he became nothing more than a flesh bag of bodily fluids. This type of death was horrible and incredibly painful. That was from only one bite. Zen was currently being attacked by more than 100 of these unknown things. Fortunately, his body was immune to any type of poison and all he really had to worry about was the blood loss. However, just the mere thought of his body being covered by many bugs sent a shiver down his spine. An hour later, he felt the two ropes on the bronze iron plates tighten, slowly raising him up from the black pool. Finally, I'm leaving this perdition now. Zen's heart filled with joy. He really thought it was going to be his death after the pig-faced monsters made such a huge deal of the black pond. It turned out not as bad as they said. As soon as he left the pond, he looked down at his body. He had already mentally prepared himself, but the sight shocked him all the same. The bugs were not a pretty sight, dark cyan, with huge abdomens like cyan gems. A fine needle protruded from each bug's head and penetrated every square inch of his body. Despite being lifted from the pond, the bugs remained latched onto him, firmly attached to his flesh by their needles. Zen was dragged to the top of the mountain by the octopuses and all the way to the valley, being left in front of the pig-faced monsters. A bumper harvest. His blood must be delicious. What a big harvest, and without the sacrifice of one of our kind, ha ha. The pig-faced monsters surrounded him and began to pull the bugs off his body. These bugs were called regal jade bugs and the octopuses fed on them occasionally. These bugs were quite difficult to fish up from the black pond. At first, the pig-faced monsters used disguises to hide in the mountain creeks and trap a few creatures from the dark region. Unfortunately, their tricks had long since worn off. The creatures of the dark region also knew how difficult it was for the octopuses to leave the valley, so they did not get close to them. The pig-faced monsters weren't strong enough and always failed to capture the creatures of the dark region, so they had no choice but sacrifice their own members. Sometimes, they would throw a pig-faced monster into the black pool to catch these regal jade bugs. These bugs were incredibly aggressive in the black pool. However, if taken out of the pond, they would become extremely stiff and unmoving. In no time at all, the pig-faced monsters had harvested 200 regal jade bugs from his body. After getting these bugs, a pig-faced monster couldn't help but snort in surprise. This human has been bit by so many regal jade bugs, but it seems nothing happens to his body. Why's that? Another pig-faced monster waved off its concern. Don't worry about it and just throw him out. He now has regal jade poison all over his body. Just a tiny bit can hurt all of us badly. That pig-faced monster's words were like sweet honey to Zen's ears. Yet, He continued to keep his eyes closed and remained motionless on the ground. If he was thrown away, he could definitely run to freedom. Zen once again felt a tentacle roll over the bronze iron plates, lifting him and poising to throw him out of the valley. However, before it could do so, the dark blue pig-faced monster spoke, "Wait." Bang! Instead of the rush of freedom, Zen felt the crash of the cold, hard ground. The dark blue pig-faced monster studied him closely, reaching out to touch his body. This human is strange. It doesn't look as if he got poisoned. The regal jade poison could turn a warrior into a literal skin bag of bodily fluids. However, Zen's body remained unchanged. Yes, you're right. This human boy is so strange. Does that mean he's still alive? Then doesn't that also mean we can use him repeatedly as bait? The pig-faced monsters were overjoyed upon this realization. Sacrificing their own members was a terrible ordeal, but with Zen here, they wouldn't need to do that anymore. Zen was internally cursing that dark blue pig-faced monster. All hope of escaping was sucked out of his body, replaced with the dread of having to be thrown into the black pond all over again. He was now a valued treasure bait for these pig-faced monsters. They would never let him go nor let him die so easily. Having stored a lot of darkness fruits, the pig-faced monsters fed one to Zen regularly and even healed some of his wounds. Since playing dead wasn't doing him any favors, Zen gave up and opened his eyes to stare at his captors helplessly. A day later, the octopuses left the caves, and entangled with each other to form a rope thousands of feet long. They took Zen with them and threw him right back into the pond. He was left soaking there for more than an hour to make sure that his entire body would be covered by the regal jade bugs. He was used as bait for 4 straight days. While Zen was subject to such misery, something else was beginning to take place in the dark cave of the tomb. Flesh and blood piled up, wrapping up a cocoon completely. Gradually, a body started to form. When its facial features began shaping, a pig face appeared, looking exactly like a pig-faced monster. This was the purified being called Teague. However, as soon as the pig face formed, it immediately crumbled and morphed into the face of a human girl. She had a gentle and charming appearance, especially with her eyes closed in peaceful slumber. On the 5th day, the human girl suddenly opened her eyes, confused. Where am I? Who am I? Her heart was filled with doubt as she carefully observed her own body. It was the body of a pig-faced monster. It was big and fleshy as well as ugly. This was an appearance that she could never accept. Phew, as she thought, there were cracks on her big body, and blood spilled. The flesh was constantly peeling off. A pair of slender hands pulled out from her bloated arms. Chapter 2903, The Regal Jade Beast. The human girl shook the blood away from her hands, the red streams painting the ground. Then, she checked them under the light, and a satisfied grin stretched on her lips. Next, she jerked her fat legs, which caused the skin to crack. The flesh began to roll upwards to reveal a pair of slender legs. Her shoulders, chest, and waist followed suit. Her thick limbs were stripped from her original body as a tangy, bloody scent filled the dark cave. Soon after, a perfectly shaped body emerged from the pile of flesh. Although she was still quite confused, she seemed to be in a better mood as her snow-white feet moved across the dark and bloody cave. As she moved, the light column that came from the valley also moved with her. The properties of the tombstone and the soil around it had changed with the birth of the purified being. They did not belong to the dark region anymore, so the light couldn't damage them. The materials outside the light column, however, were different. As long as they touched the light, their energy and the light column's energy would attempt to eliminate each other. As the light column started to move, numerous ditches appeared in the ground because of the erosion. The light column almost hit some of the pig-faced monsters that were in the middle of worshipping. The ground trembled as all of them scampered to the edge of the valley to hide, and then proceeded to watch the scene with caution. What happened? Has the light column moved? It's Master Teague. Has Master Teague turned into a purified being? All the pig-faced monsters that knew about the situation were aware that the light column did not illuminate the tomb, nor the tombstone, but Master Teague. Once Master Teague became a purified being, the light column would follow him wherever he went. Since the light column shifted around, it was obvious that Master Teague was awake. All of them saw how the brightness followed him as he walked in the dark cave. If Master Teague has succeeded, why won't he leave the dark cave? The dark blue pig-faced monster scowled. Maybe he needs to get everything ready, the pig-faced monster next to it replied and burst into giggles. It is said that a purified being can give us the ability to leave the darkness, right? Another pig-faced monster asked, its tone full of expectation. The dark blue pig-faced monster nodded and said, according to what I heard, yes, but it's not permanent. It's still better than spending the whole life in the dark region, the other pig-faced monster exclaimed excitedly. The light column kept moving, which caused the ditches in the ground to run deeper and deeper. Finally, it returned to its original position and remained still. The pig-faced monsters thought that Master Teague was about to show up, so they all knelt on the ground and waited respectfully. At the same time, the octopuses had again thrown Zen into the deep area of the black pool behind the valley. He had been thrown there for so many times that it could be said that he was even used to it. The regal jade bugs were highly poisonous to other living creatures, but not to Zen. He only felt like he was being poked hundreds of times. At the very least, he didn't die. What he didn't know, however, was there were more than just the regal jade bugs that lived in the black pool. Something is wrong today. Where are those bugs? His face twisted with an unreadable expression as he floated quietly atop the pool's inky depths. 5 minutes had passed, and as things had been the past few days, those regal jade bugs should have swarmed him by now. Yet, it was exceptionally quiet. There wasn't even a single regal jade bug on his body. Did I get too many of them these days and they are now extinct? He thought. Just as his imagination had run wild, he felt a wave in the thick black pool. His heart began to pound loudly in his chest. The black pool was so viscous that he could hardly move freely in it. With such a strong wave, he was afraid that it might have come from a gigantic creature with unfathomable powers. Don't come at me, he prayed fervently in his heart. The wave in the black pool grew increasingly stronger until his heartbeat rang in his ears. Under the pool was indeed a gigantic creature, and it silently approached him. He began to understand why the regal jade bugs had stopped attacking him. They were probably avoiding the gigantic creature. Grmmm. The wave suddenly stopped coming, and a pulling force tugged at him from the front. Zen felt like he had been sucked into a gigantic beast's mouth, which he was. Once he was inside of it, the beast swam downwards and dragged the bronze iron plates along with it. At that point, the octopuses by the black pool had simultaneously grasped at the rope on the bronze plates firmly with their tentacles. When they felt that the plates had sunk, they began to pull the rope upwards. The octopuses were so powerful that even Zen stood no chance against their force. On the other hand, the gigantic beast in the black pool was not weak either. It desperately dragged Zen into the depths of the pool, and soon enough, the two parties began to fight each other. Meanwhile, Zen felt utterly helpless in the beast's big mouth. His situation allowed him no room to resist. Still, he strongly hoped that the octopuses could pull him ashore. After all, it was better to be treated as a bait than to be eaten alive. The tug of war continued for a while, until the octopuses suddenly exerted their full strength. Zen felt that he was dragged upwards and rushed out of the black pool. It was still dark around him since he was inside the big mouth, but he definitely felt that he was on his way up. Bang! The pulling went on until the gigantic beast collided with the mountain, and the heavy impact caused it to spat Zen out. A sharp pain ripped through his body as he landed. He immediately crawled up with the bronze iron plates still on his body. Then he was greeted by the ugly sight of the beast. The gigantic beast had an incomparably big mouth and 2 wings. Its entire body was a cyan hue that was as smooth as grease, as if it had been carved from a chunk of jade. However, it was a living gigantic beast, aptly named the regal jade beast. Grr! The regal jade beast lowered its head and roared. Things quickly took an unexpected turn when, instead of targeting Zen, it flew towards the nearest octopus. The octopuses shrieked in horror when they realized that they were no match for the gigantic beast. Thus, they quickly withdrew their tentacles and ran towards the valley. Even though they moved in high speeds, the beast had caught up to the last octopus and crushed it. Then, it began to bite the creature's body until it was torn into pieces. Zen had been hanging from the tentacles of the last octopus. Now that it was nothing but chunks of meat, it couldn't take him back to the valley. The regal jade beast chewed some more until it swallowed the whole octopus in a few gulps, and then it turned to look at Zen. The beast's terrifying stare sent chills down Zen's spine. In a moment of desperation, he gathered all his strength and rolled down the mountain with the bronze iron plates. The mountain was steep, so he was able to roll down rather quickly. Although the bumpy ride injured him along the way, it was still better than being eaten by the beast. When the beast saw that its target had escaped, a fierce light flashed in its eyes. It wasted no time and followed Zen all the way down. The pig-faced monsters were still kneeling before their purified being. Suddenly, they heard a loud noise from above and saw that the octopuses had fled back to the triangular caves. It was as if they were escaping from something, which astonished the pig-faced monsters. Chapter 2904, Emerge. The octopuses had no natural enemies on stage 13. In fact, their only shortcoming was that they couldn't leave the triangular caves where they hid, limiting their range of motion. What kind of creature chased after them, making them flee like mad? The pig-faced monsters wondered. Clatter, clatter, clatter. The octopuses were followed closely by Zen as he rolled down the mountain, still locked in the bronze plates. The plates bumping along the way made a deafening sound. Bang! Finally, Zen smashed into the valley. More than half his body was embedded underground. The two pig-faced monsters nearest Zen paled in shock. If they were caught in Zen's fall, they'd have definitely been crushed. What happened? Look, what's that? That seems to be a regal jade beast. Having lived around the black pool for years, the pig-faced monsters knew a little about it. Creatures in the pool were considered very special, the regal jade bugs being just one kind of them, and at the lowest level. The bodies of these bugs were nothing like that of common bugs with flesh and blood. They seemed to be carved out of jade, making their bodies extremely tough. Many strange life forms populated the black pool. It was said that some pig-faced monsters had even seen giant beasts emerge from the water. The regal jade beasts were cyan all over, and like the regal jade bugs, their bodies seemed carved from jade. But in all the time the pig-faced monsters had been there, the beasts had only appeared once or twice. Many no longer believed in their existence. No concrete evidence was available to prove whether or not the regal jade beasts really existed in the black pool. Still, no one explored the black pool and lived. The pig-faced monsters had no idea how deep the water was, nor what creatures lurked down there. But this time, they encountered the strange Zen. He was probably the only bait who could be reused after being bitten by the regal jade bugs. What was most surprising, though, was how he had managed to attract the giant regal jade beast from the black pool. Thump, 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 with its great wings and 4 strong legs, climbing down the mountain was an easy task for the beast. Just as Zen hit the ground, the regal jade beast also jumped into the valley. The great beast looked as though it was carved right out of jade. The pig-faced monsters felt its powerful aura and trembled in fear. But the regal jade beast wasn't interested in the weak pig-faced monsters of the valley. It gave them a quick glance before jumping into one of the triangular caves. The octopus hiding in the triangular cave naturally tried to resist, but the strength of the regal jade beast was all too great. Even with dozens of tentacles wrapped around its body, it ruined them all with a mere shake of its body. Both the octopus, tentacles and its head were considered delicacies to the beast. It took a great bite out of the creature, and in mere seconds, the octopus was gobbled up. When the beast stepped out of the cave, it didn't seem satisfied, it went straight into another cave to feast. Noises of struggle came from the cave before another octopus was eaten up. What should we do? How ferocious. If they're all eaten up, how are we going to survive? The pig-faced monsters looked upset as the onset of doom came over them. They could establish themselves on stage 13 because they relied on the octopuses. But now that they were eaten up by the beast one by one, the pig-faced monsters could foresee that their life in the dark region would be harder. We still have Master Teague. Master Teague has already become a purified being. Master Teague, where are you? Why haven't you appeared? This regal jade beast is no match for you. Just now, the light column circled the valley before stopping. Nobody knew what was going on under the tomb. Once the octopuses were in the regal jade beast's stomach, the beast headed to the valley to slaughter pig-faced monsters. Its prey scattered, shrieking and howling in misery. After a round of slaughter, its eyes fell right on Zen. This human bait was what had attracted it from the depths of the black pool. A wry smile made its way to Zen's face as he felt the gaze of the regal jade beast. The regal jade bugs couldn't dream of killing Zen, but this beast easily tore the octopuses apart. Zen's body was probably more like paper in its hands. But now, Zen was basically a fish on a chopping block. He could barely resist, let alone run away. All he could do was lie on the ground and watch the beast approach him, step by step. Meanwhile, under the tomb, the human girl wandered in circles before returning to the center of the dark cave, sitting atop bloody piles of meat. The narrow space was somehow confusing. The world wasn't supposed to be so narrow, cramped, and dark. What was wrong? Just then, she heard the shouts from outside. Master Teague. The name sounded familiar. Were they calling her? But as she tried to recall in her subconscious, a hateful pig face appeared in her mind. She couldn't help but frown at the thought of it and tried to direct her mind elsewhere. Although the shouts were rather annoying, they reminded her that there was a wide world outside the tomb, waiting for her. I want to step outside. With this thought, she began tapping her foot. By merely releasing force from her small foot, her body shot up like an arrow. The explosive strength of her physical body was beyond impressive. Bang! The fresh soil that covered the tomb burst from the girl's strength as she rushed out. The moment she came into contact with the light, it changed significantly. Originally, the beam of light was in the shape of a circular column, but the moment it touched the young girl's body, the light concentrated right on her, illuminating her entire figure. Only a bright silhouette remained. The light, it makes me comfortable. Bathed in light, the girl looked rather relaxed. She could still feel the countless little spirits contained within the light, subject to her orders. In a single thought, rays of light were woven into a shiny dress that fit her perfectly. Everyone else in the valley was wide-eyed and dumbfounded. After being madly slaughtered by the regal jade beast, the pig-faced monsters were left in desperate fear. When the tomb exploded, they fled in all directions. Now they felt saved, thinking that Master Teague finally appeared. But what rushed out from under the tomb was a mere human girl. Even Zen was just as shocked. Only a few steps away from him was the regal jade beast, and one of its cyan claws was already pressing onto his head. He was sure he was doomed. But when the human girl came into his view, his surprise almost made him forget the dire situation he was in. Chapter 2905, Elvinia's Impaired Memory. Elvinia. Elvinia now possessed a body on the other shore. Zen could recognize her at a glance by her thick black hair and her eyes that were as deep as ancient pools. When the woman heard the name, Elvinia, she fell into a trance as her mind began searching for an answer to the meaning of this name. The name seemed to be hers, but she couldn't recall if it was. The man in front of her was familiar and intimate as well, but who was he? She was enraged on seeing the regal jade beast had caught hold of the man. "Beast, stay away from him," she screeched terrifyingly. Roar. The regal jade beast felt threatened by the woman and unleashed a great roar. It did not want to provoke her, but it wouldn't let go of Zen either. It grabbed Zen with a front paw and scaled the mountain wall at the back of the valley. It might have been enormous, but it moved as agile as a kitten. The woman remained deep in thought. She felt overbearingly uneasy as she watched the man being taken by the regal jade beast, but she didn't know why. Driven by pure instinct, her arm raised up slowly and a ball of light began gathering in her hand. Buzz. The light rays began swirling and dancing around. Then, a white light shot at the regal jade beast. No matter how fast and nimble it was, it could not escape the light. Hiss. A puff of black smoke rose from the body of the regal jade beast as the light hit it. Its once smooth skin now became mottled and dotted with holes all over. Woo! The regal jade beast let out a miserable cry and slid down from the mountain. Kill that gigantic beast. Come on, Master Teague. That beast slaughtered more than half of our race. The pig-faced monsters lucky enough to survive shouted while hiding in the corner of the valley. They didn't know who this woman was, but they figured she must be the purified being if she was able to control the light as she did. Some of them regarded her as Teague. Just as the regal jade beast was about to fall into the valley, its back shuddered. Suddenly, a fresh pair of wings spread out, allowing it to fly up. This didn't faze the woman much. Her eyes flashed and she raised her hand to point at the regal jade beast. Within split seconds, countless thick light columns rained down on it. The regal jade beast's wings made it even more agile and flexible. Dragging a dark green shadow, it flew between the light columns with ease. The body of the regal jade beast was much thicker than that of an ordinary physical body. It could sustain the occasional blow of light without serious injury. Like a butterfly fluttering among the flowers, the beast swiveled in, out and around the light columns before it rushed straight towards the woman. Elvinia, look out, Zen warned at the top of his lungs as he and the regal jade beast dashed down together. If Elvinia was hit by the gigantic beast, she would be smashed into minced meat. Elvinia blinked, her pupils slightly dilated, and a glowing mark of light appeared beneath her feet. She put her tiptoe into the mark, and with a thin smile on her lips, she muttered, "Great Sanskrit light." This was her instinct, she could summon it at will. Buzz. A beam of light as thin as a hair erupted from the light mark beneath her foot into the air. Oh no, it missed. Zen's face saddened as he watched the thin light pass by the regal jade beast. Zen soon realized how wrong he was. The power Elvinia controlled was far beyond his imagination. The string of light instantly expanded and formed a dazzling column of light that filled the entire valley in the blink of an eye. The light column caused everything in the valley to vanish into thin air. The stones, the leaves, the caves and the pig-faced monsters had all disappeared. It continued to expand wildly, causing the mountain walls at both ends of the valley and the cliffs and mountains nearby to disappear too. This scene left all the creatures lurking in the dark region ill at ease. Has the purified being of stage 13 been born? I think it's coming from where the pig-faced monsters live. Humph, they must be supported by the blood assembly. Otherwise, how could a purified being appear among those idiots? The light column was tens of thousands of feet in diameter and beamed a few seconds more before it gradually dimmed. The whole valley, as well as the surrounding mountains, had disappeared, and a huge crater was left on the ground. But the tombstone and the dark cave under the tombstone were still intact, standing where they were alone. Zen stretched his arms out and pushed himself off the ground. The bronze iron plates had disappeared into the strong light and Zen was free. Why hasn't the beast disappeared? How is this possible? From the corner of his eye, Zen noticed something greenish on the ground. It was the regal jade beast, but it was only the size of a fist now. The regal jade beast must be from the dark region. Logically speaking, it should disappear into the light without a trace. Why it had remained and shrunk to this size puzzled Zen. He reached out and picked it up. It felt cold, as if it was not a living thing and more like a jade stone. Zen studied the regal jade beast in his hand when a light flashed in front of him. Elvenia had appeared. "What did you call me just now?" she asked curiously. "Elvenia," Zen replied with a frown. She tilted her head, looked at Zen innocently and asked, "What's your name?" Zen sighed in his heart at Elvenia's question. When he was grabbed by the tentacles, the white shadow had already rushed to Elvenia's soul of light. There was nothing Zen could do back then. He imagined Elvenia's soul of light would probably be devoured by the white shadow. But things had not gone that way at all. Perhaps something unexpected happened when the white shadow had tried to devour Elvenia's soul. It failed and Elvenia's memory flame prevailed over it. Elvenia's soul of light and memory were both damaged. "My name is Zen Luo," Zen answered. "Zen Luo," Elvenia repeated in a soft voice. Zen nodded and asked, "Do you remember?" Elvenia nodded and said seriously, "Yes." Zen looked at her strangely and asked, "What do you remember?" Suddenly, Elvenia pounced on Zen, embracing him and looking into his eyes tenderly. She would never have acted like this or even looked at him like this before. "I remember that I seem to like you very much," she said sweetly. Zen was frozen. He knew her memory was a mess, but that was the last thing he had expected. Chapter 2906, No Choice. Elvenia had always been a cold woman. So Zen was not used to her current tenderness and affection. That was not who she was. However, at the sight of her exquisite face so close to his, Zen felt his heart racing. She could easily crush any other woman in the Oneness Sky Palace with her radiant beauty. Save one, only Dorothy's lovely visage could hold a candle to hers. Zen said with a smile, "You must have made a mistake." He then gently pushed Elvenia away. Really, Elvenia's eyes were filled with confusion. She rummaged through her memories and found another clue among her random fragments of recollection. A trace of anger suddenly appeared in her eyes. "How dare you intrude into my place?" "What, your place?" Zen froze for a moment. As quick as a flash, Elvenia shoved her palm into his chest. He had no time to stop her. Puff. Living creatures of the dark region were extremely powerful. Even the pig-faced monsters and human monkey monsters were far stronger than other creatures living outside, not to mention the black monkeys and the three-eyed boy. The body of a purified being was refined in a special way. Even though it had just been formed, it still contained terrifying power. Elvenia's light slap contained far more than 1,000 divine megatons of force. Zen felt his chest collapse and he was sent flying nearly a mile away. Ahem. Slowly, painfully, Zen got to his feet, and promptly coughed up 2 mouthfuls of blood. "What's wrong with Elvenia? She was gentle and sweet a minute ago, but then she hit me. There was some serious power in that blow. I think she really intended to kill me." Whoosh. Seeing Zen get up from the ground, Elvenia suddenly raised her eyebrows in dissatisfaction. She tapped the tip of her toe on the ground and flew straight up into the air. Like the lithist acrobat, she made a perfect arc in midair, and swooped down towards Zen, feet first. If she hit him this time, she would probably stomp him into the ground. Taking a deep breath, Zen rolled sideways and dodged her attack in a rather awkward posture. Bang! Elvenia hit the ground like a meteor, and created a huge crater hundreds of feet in diameter. Since she missed, she suddenly twisted her body and tried to grab Zen. She acted so quickly that Zen had no time to dodge. He helplessly watched her grab his neck. Zen had no doubt that even if she used a fraction of her strength, she'd crush his neck and his head would fall from his body. The purified being was terrifying. "Anyone who dares to break into my holy tomb must die," Elvenia shouted angrily. "Wait." Zen raised his hands in surrender. "Wait for what?" Elvenia asked. After listening to what Elvenia had just said, Zen finally figured out what was going on. He found that not only did she have Elvinia's memories, she also had those of the White Shadow, Master Teague of the pig-faced monsters. Teague's memories were quite different. In them, Zen trespassed, walking into the holy tomb to disturb his purification and reincarnation. So he would surely want to kill him. Under the influence of this memory, Elvinia tried to kill Zen as well. "You've got it all wrong again. Search your memories," Zen immediately said. "I made a mistake again." Elvinia was at a loss again. Her grip was tight around Zen's neck. Zen said helplessly, "Yes, think hard. Who am I?" She saw his sincere look. He wasn't lying to her. Elvinia began to plumb the depths of her soul, hoping to unearth another clue. Soon after, her expression changed completely, and her look was one of love and affection. She released Zen's neck and pulled him into her arms. She whispered, "I remember. You are Zen, the one I love." This time, Zen decided that silence was golden. He survived the octopuses and the pig-faced monsters and even withstood the bloody bites of the regal jade bugs in the black pool. But now he was at Elvinia's mercy. If she killed him, that would not be good. That was not what he wanted at all. "Yes, you're right, I'm the one you love," Zen chimed in. What he wanted to do now was to calm Elvinia down and take her away from here. It would be better if he could escape the dark region and leave the other shore with her. There were many talented people in the Oneness Sky Palace. Someone there could fix the chaos in her soul, and give her access to the right memories. "Do you love me?" Elvinia asked, blinking her eyes in curiosity. "Yes, I do," Zen answered without hesitation. Upon hearing this, Elvinia displayed an innocent and childish smile. She carefully sized up Zen, closed her eyes and said, "Then kiss me." Quote. Zen was dumbfounded by her sudden request. Even if they were in a relationship, the dark region was no place for a kiss, or anything else for that matter. And Elvinia's newly formed body had a very pungent smell of blood, which was off-putting. After waiting for a bit with her lips pursed, Elvinia opened her eyes again and gave Zen a puzzled look. "What's wrong?" Nothing. Zen was afraid that Teague's memory might come back to haunt her again. He didn't need that to happen. If he kissed her, that might help. His close brush with death still fresh in his mind, he brought his lips close to hers. Finally, he kissed her soft lips. In the past, the dark region expanded very slowly in stage 13. For several thousand years, the dark region had only occupied a fifth of the area of stage 13. But the dark region was growing. The past few years had seen it expand more rapidly than it had before. A tremendous untapped vein of burning crystal was discovered in stage 13, which attracted the attention of the more powerful races. Whoosh! 3 black monkeys bounded through the mountains. They were man-sized, as opposed to the 10-foot-tall giant monkeys. Their bodies were covered with palm-sized yellow pieces of paper, which emulated the appearance of armor, even if it were made of paper. Each piece of yellow paper had runes inscribed upon it. As they jumped from rock to tree making their way up the mountain, the yellow paper flapped in the wind, making all kinds of racket. These black monkeys were far stronger and faster than the rest of their brethren. That's why they were chosen for this mission. Before long, they ascended the mountain. As they looked down from the peak, they were all shocked. From their vantage point at the top of the mountain, they could see a circular area. Everything in this area had disappeared. No trees, no rocks, nothing. It looked something had exploded, and taken everything with it. Is that the power of the light? A purified being is stronger than that. That's frightening. If the blood assembly gets their grubby paws on it, I'm afraid we can't keep the vein. The 2 black monkeys grew gloomy. The black monkey standing at the end of the line said in confusion, "The pig-faced monsters lived here, right? If that purified being is Teague, he wouldn't kill every member of his race and ruin their land. Something's wrong." Chapter 2907, Important Memory. When the black monkey finished its words, the other 2 also wore cautious expressions on their faces. No matter how ruthless the purified being was, he wouldn't have killed his own race. It made no sense and caused an uneasy feeling in their hearts. Perhaps the purified being is not a pig-faced monster after all. Another black monkey spoke and voiced its speculations out loud. "I can't say for sure though." The black monkey shook its head in an attempt to diffuse the suspicions. "It seems we were right to come here to have a look for ourselves." Just as the 3 black monkeys were immersed in their discussion, several thousand feet away from them, a few red dots of light appeared. Several one-eyed monsters perched atop another mountain scanned the area ahead of them. Buzz, buzz. Obviously, the several one-eyed creatures had noticed the presence of the black monkeys as well. Their eyes gleamed with a particular frequency that indicated friendliness. These one-eyed creatures belonged to a different force and had never encountered the black monkeys before. Apparently, they were also enchanted by the frightening light column. As a sign of friendship, the black monkeys waved gently at the one-eyed monsters. Then, they moved down from the peak of the mountain. Besides the black monkeys and the one-eyed monsters, other creatures were lurking nearby in the dark region. They were all sneaking up to the area inhabited by the pig-faced monsters. Even though the entire valley now stood destroyed, Zen was still able to tell the right direction. As long as they followed the mountain stream, they should be able to retrace their steps. They had to climb the back wall of the Grand Sky Temple at the end of the stream to leave the dark region safely. Now with Elvinia's strength, those black monkeys wouldn't dare to make trouble for them. Before we leave the dark region, I'll store this in your space ring. Zen glanced at Elvinia as he pointed at the small regal jade beast. Space ring, I don't understand what you mean, Elvinia asked while peering over at Zen with curious eyes. Due to the fact that her memory had almost been wiped clean, she had aged back a few years mentally. She now resembled a child at the age of 7. It made her look innocent and adorable. Try to remember what it is yourself, Zen said impatiently. Elvinia thought long and hard as she blinked at him. Then, she raised her hand and asked, "Is this what you are talking about?" Buzz. As a white square formed in response to her gesture, a space ring emerged in her hand. Clatter. Before Zen could react, darkness fruits, candles, soul pills, and a pile of other short tokens came pouring out from her space ring. Wow, so many things to play with. Overjoyed by the innumerable objects, Elvinia began to clap her hands in excitement. She grabbed a handful of soul pills and started to play with them. Zen pursed his lips before he grabbed her hand and stuffed everything back in the space ring. Then, he turned to her and said in a stern voice, "We do not have time for this. You can play to your heart's content after we leave the dark region." Okay, I'm sorry, Elvinia nodded obediently but wore a pouty expression when she turned her face away. Just as Zen proceeded to store the little regal jade beast into the space ring, Elvinia glanced at it, and her expression suddenly switched. Strange darkness hovered over her eyes before she said, "I can't leave the dark region." Hearing her unexpected confession, Zen felt slightly stunned. He raised his brows and asked, "What do you mean you can't leave?" "I have something very important that I must do." After she finished her words, she turned in the opposite direction and ran at a surprisingly fast speed. What does she mean by that? What could be so important for her to leave like this? Zen muttered to himself as he gazed at her receding figure. But now, when Elvinia was in a state where she could not remember anything clearly, Zen had no other choice but to go after her. Fortunately, Elvinia was dressed in a robe woven by light. It made it easy for him to keep track of her in the dark. Due to her eye-catching robe, she was easy to be spotted by the creatures lurking in the dark region. The 3 black monkeys were stationed in some secluded area in the darkness. The yellow pieces of paper on their bodies emitted a distinct aura. This aura could keep their figures hidden, making them hard to be detected through the naked eye. That's a purified being. It's a human. How is that possible? The 3 black monkeys felt collectively puzzled at this sight. Instinctively, they had pinned the purified being to be Teague. But when they saw it was Elvinia, the human girl, they were in a state of shock. Aside from the black monkeys, other creatures scattered in other places also shared the same puzzled expression. God knew what had happened to the pig-faced monsters. Meanwhile, Elvinia continued to advance with quick steps. She was moving so fast that Zen struggled to keep up with her pace. Fortunately, she did not go too far and abruptly stopped in place. She just stood there and stared blankly ahead into space. When Zen walked over to her side, he found out that Elvinia was standing in front of the black pool. It's the black pool. Zen stared at the black quagmire and felt his heart sink as he recalled his past experience here. Although the regal jade bugs didn't take his life, that horrible scene alone was enough for him to remember for a lifetime. After Elvinia unleashed the light column, the surrounding mountains were reduced to the ground. However, the black pool remained intact. Elvinia doesn't know about the existence of the black pool. She has been muttering about something important that she needs to do. Since she came here, the recollection about the black pool might not be hers, but Teague's. Zen concluded as he studied Elvinia's figure. The important thing Elvinia mentioned must be concerned with Teague, and that was why it was engraved in her mind. It soon became clear the black pool was by no means just a place to provide the octopuses with food. There was more to it than met the eye. "Elvinia, what is it that is so important to you?" Zen inquired as he glanced in her direction. As if possessed, Elvinia kept her gaze steady at the black pool and replied, "I must go in." Look, Don't rush into things. There is a kind of deadly poisonous bug in the black pool. If you go in blindly, I'm worried that. Just as Zen tried to persuade her out of doing this, she jumped down into the black pool with a plop. Without a hint of hesitation, she had dived down towards the bottom. Elvina, wait. Although Elvinia's physical body was not to be underestimated, it still wouldn't be able to withstand the poison of the regal jade bugs. Left with no other choice, Zen dived in the black pool to follow after her. After Zen jumped, he struggled to make sense of his surroundings. The mud was so thick that it became hard for him to move further down. In a moment of desperation, he grabbed onto Elvinia's feet and was dragged down by her. 100 feet, 300 feet, 1,000 feet. Previously, when the octopuses threw Zen into the black pool, he had only covered a distance of a few hundred feet. At that time, Zen was convinced he had reached the bottom of the black pool. But now, dragged by Elvinia, he had gone further down, and she still didn't stop. It seemed the black pool was much deeper than he had thought. Along the way, Zen had been worried that they would encounter the regal jade bugs or the regal jade beasts. But none of them showed up. After diving for more than 10,000 feet, Elvinia suddenly stopped. Zen reached out his hand to touch the bottom of the black pool. The bottom was abnormally chilling and smooth. The feeling resembled when he felt the regal jade beast. What is this? I can't see anything. Just as Zen tried to figure it out, a ball of white blinding light appeared beside him. The moment the light shone, it completely wiped off the black mud stationed at the bottom. However, when the black mud at the bottom of the pool had vanished, the residue floating above naturally settled back down. Since Elvinia had relied on her ability to continuously release rays of light, she forcefully created a temporary space at the bottom of the black pool. Chapter 2908, The Civilization Artifact. In the light that Elvinia had released, Zen finally saw what was going on around him, surprised. They were now stepping onto the floor that was made of a huge piece of jade. Is this whole floor paved with a single piece of cyan jade? Zen muttered. Elvinia seemed to know this and didn't react to Zen's question. The jade floor at the bottom of the black pool was lined. Elvinia lowered her head to look closely at it. She walked along the patterns, as if she was looking for something. The jade itself could not resist the light that Elvinia had released. Wherever the light passed through, the surface of the jade floor became corroded. They walked for a dozen steps at the bottom of the pool when the jade under their feet lightened in color. It started to become transparent, allowing them to easily see through it. Zen had previously noticed random lines on the jade floor. But as he looked more carefully, he found they weren't lines but regal jade bugs that were embedded in the floor. Did the regal jade bugs in the black pool grow out of this? A strange thought came to Zen's mind. This place was full of wonders. Wilder guesses wouldn't feel wrong in this situation. What he saw next proved him right. The regal jade bugs under the jade floor moved suddenly and began to fly around within the jade, probably having been disturbed by Elvinia's light. The hard jade was like water to the regal jade bugs. They wandered freely within it. These bugs would be safe as long as they didn't come out because the jade floor had blocked the light that was capable of eliminating them. But it looked like they were courting death as they emerged from the floor and began to fly around. They pointed the cyan needles that were in their mouth upward, and for some time, it looked like the floor was covered with needles. Watch out. Zen was not sure if Elvinia had the ability to resist the regal jade poison. If she didn't, it would be a lot of trouble if she were to be bitten by these bugs. Zen lifted Elvinia onto his shoulder. Puff, puff, puff. Moments later, Zen felt pain in his feet as the needles began to stab him. Groups of regal jade bugs had gathered at his feet and were stabbing their needles into his soles. Zen might not be afraid of the regal jade poison, but being stabbed by the needles was still a painful experience. The needles were densely packed before him and it looked like he was walking on a mountain formed by them. He had barely taken a few steps before he had to stop because his feet had become a mass of flesh and blood, no thanks to the poisonous needles. Go, Elvinia barked, perched on Zen's shoulder. She waved a hand and released a ray of strong light that shot out towards Zen's feet, erasing the poisonous needles the moment they emerged from the jade floor. The light had now cleared a path for Zen. The regal jade bugs, on realizing that it was impossible to stop Zen, rushed with a mad buzz towards Elvinia instead. Humph, Elvinia snorted and smiled contemptuously. A white circle of light spread out from her body. The regal jade bugs found it impossible to go anywhere near Elvinia, because the moment they left the jade floor they were completely erased. The suicide attacks of the regal jade bugs had lasted for about 3 minutes before they finally stopped. No one knew how many regal jade bugs had died in the light. Zen breathed a sigh of relief. They were lucky to get rid of the regal jade bugs, and he hoped they would not encounter the regal jade beasts. This thought had barely entered his mind when a pair of huge eyes loomed before him. It looked like a huge regal jade beast was embedded under the floor. The beast's eyes were wide open but lifeless. If this thing comes out, we'll be in so much trouble. Zen murmured. He was incapable of fighting against the regal jade beast at the moment. Even Elvenia would have great difficulty in subduing it. But Zen was worrying unnecessarily. The regal jade beast didn't emerge from the jade floor. They had walked some distance when Zen spotted more regal jade beasts, about 60 of them, intertwined with each other. And these were only the regal jade beasts that were visible. God knew how much deeper this jade was. There were probably countless regal jade beasts hiding in its depths. If these regal jade beasts were let out, they might easily flatten stage 13. He walked a few hundred feet before the regal jade beasts were left behind. The color of the jade floor under his feet had turned into a shade of dark green. Zen had just begun to think that there was nothing underneath him when a 10-foot-long cyan feather appeared out of nowhere. Such a huge feather, Zen said, surprised. Finally found it. Elvenia gasped, smiling, and jumped off Zen's shoulder. She tiptoed towards the feather. Zen followed close behind, and as he looked down, he found that more and more feathers were appearing. A sudden thought flashed through his mind. These feathers belonged to the wings of a giant bird. Was there a giant bird lurking underneath this jade floor? He was proved right when he spotted the huge bird head some distance away. Elvenia didn't stop running until after she had passed the bird's head. Underneath the surface of the jade floor was a spiky ball in the shape of a diamond. Elvenia looked at it for a while before kneeling down on the ground beside it. She placed her hand on the floor above the diamond-shaped spiky ball and released a bright light from her palm. The jade floor melted quickly under the strong light, leaving a gaping hole in its wake and exposing the diamond-shaped spiky ball. He didn't know what the ball was made of. The surface of the ball darkened under the strong light, but it showed no signs of melting. "What's this?" Zen asked. "I don't know," Elvenia answered. She had come here driven by her memory to find the diamond-shaped spiky ball. She didn't know what exactly it was or what it could be used for. Zen was speechless. It was a long time later that he helplessly said, "You have looked for it for so long. And now you've found it and you're saying you don't know what it is." "Let me think," Elvenia said. She searched her memory, head tilted and eyes narrowed at the ball. A few minutes later, she burst out, "Got it. It seems to be called the Civilization Artifact." Chapter 2909, The Regal Jade Civilization. The Civilization Artifact. It was hard for Zen to figure out exactly what the item was just based on its name. "What is it used for?" "I'm not sure. If I could just remember." Elvenia continued to search her memories for information about the artifact. But as she thought about it, she felt something tear deep in her soul, as if a memory was about to break through. All of a sudden, she covered her head with both hands and squatted down. "OWW, it hurts." Clatter. As soon as she released her hand, the civilization artifact fell to the ground. "I really can't remember. My head hurts," Elvenia complained. Apparently, she couldn't think too much of this. Trying to dig too deeply into her memories was quite painful. Zen stretched out his hand and gently rubbed her forehead. Then he asked her to take out dozens of soul pills and swallow them. Elvenia's physical body was different from Zen's. Zen's body was projected onto the other shore from the source world, and the projected body seemed just like his real one. But only Elvenia's soul entered the other shore, and the body she inhabited here was like the armor. What form she would take after she left here, only the gods knew. But at least she could still absorb the soul pills. That was the silver lining. After taking the soul pills, Elvenia looked better. She didn't seem quite so pale, and she seemed more energetic. She pursed her lips and put her arms around her knees, unwilling to dredge up her memories again. She said, "I don't know what it is. Here you go, take it if you want." Hearing her complaint, Zen could only comfort her, "All right. I'll study it and figure out what it is." Then, Zen bent down to pick up the civilization artifact and placed it in his palm, observing it closely. The item was extremely delicate. It was a diamond-like gem inlaid with over 10 sharp thorns. Zen touched the sharp thorns and twisted one of them as an experiment. Crack! The thorns could twist. Zen was slightly shocked. This should have done something, and maybe he triggered some mechanism. Okay, so maybe that isn't the right one. How about this one? After thinking about this, Zen began to twist the thorns one by one. He moved on to the next, and the one after that. Click, click, click. Every time a thorn was twisted, the civilization artifact would respond with a faint chime. The sound seemed to come from under the jade, but Zen looked around and could not ascertain where it emanated from. When Zen twisted the final sharp thorn, the ground began shaking under their feet. Zen and Elvinia had to fight to keep their balance. Dong! The huge jade under the black pool started to shudder. Rumble! The black monkeys lurking in the dark and the other races also felt the quake, and they saw the black mud in the black pool constantly surging out and flowing in all directions. What happened? Something is rising from the black pool. What's that? The black mud from the pool flowed away, and a huge jade stone was revealed. This stone was millions of feet wide. As the giant jade stone continued to rise, the ground around the black pool cracked. More jade was exposed, so Zen and Elvinia also rose from the bottom of the pool. That's a huge city. Zen looked around, his eyes wide from shock. The originally flat surface of the jade ground began to change. Some parts of the ground started to sink, and the others started to bulge. The ground fell away to lay bare many roofs, turrets, towers, houses, and even bridges. Who would have guessed there was a huge city beneath the black pool, carved entirely out of jade? There were all sorts of creatures embedded within the regal jade city, such as the regal jade bugs and the regal jade beasts. In addition, there were pythons, unicorn cows, and other strange creatures with alien shapes. Zen was not the only one who was shaken up by this. The creatures from the dark region hiding in every corner were flabbergasted when they laid eyes on the regal jade city. The calmest one among them might be Elvinia. She just thought that the green city looked incredibly beautiful, but she had no interest in what it might mean. Buzz! More and more stairs appeared and spread from the surface of the giant stone to Zen's feet. The steps led to a jade tower close by. Let's go and have a look, Zen said. Elvinia didn't respond. She figured that thinking had given her that splitting headache, so she decided not to do too much of that. She delightedly followed behind Zen. Zen and Elvinia ascended the jade staircase. Within a few seconds, they had reached the top of the tower. At the top of the tower, there was a square platform, on which floated a glowing speck. It was like a little pinprick of light. The speck danced around like a fairy, but it couldn't leave the square platform. Zen walked to the side of the platform and stretched out his hand, trying to touch the thing. But his hand passed right through it. It seemed that it existed in a different dimension and could not touch Zen's physical body. Buzz! After the speck of light passed through Zen's palm, it curled up in the corner of the square platform and convulsed continuously. It seemed to point to Zen's left hand, which held the civilization artifact. Do you want this? Zen asked, pointing at the civilization artifact. He didn't know whether the green speck of light understood his words or not, and it only continued dancing. The moment Zen placed the civilization artifact on the platform, the speck of light shot towards it. Buzz! Soon after, a green light shot out from the civilization artifact and enveloped Zen and Elvinia in its rays. Zen felt the sky and earth spinning. The regal jade city disappeared and was replaced by a void. Brown clouds floated in that void. Elvinia walked into the void and asked nonchalantly, "Where are we?" Zen had already deduced that the scenery of the void was the chaos. Just as he was about to answer Elvinia, a loud voice rang out from the void. "This is the chaos." Elvinia blinked and asked, "Then who are you?" "I am the regal jade spirit and the only member of the regal jade race who is still awake. The rest of them have slept for hundreds of millions of years," the clear voice answered. "Then where did the city go? Is it an illusion?" Zen asked. Following Elvinia's memories, they had taken great pains to obtain the civilization artifact. Surely it wasn't showing them only the pretty scenery, was it? The civilization artifact has recorded the development of the 749th chaos. You can see the birth, the beginning, the growth and the destruction of the entire regal jade civilization, the voice answered. The 749th chaos. Zen was slightly stunned. Yes, we are the 749th civilization to rule the chaos. A trace of pride could be heard in that disembodied voice. Chapter 2910, The Battle Between Civilizations. In the old days, many ruling civilizations existed in the chaos. The dreaded Eye Demons and the Grand Sky Race were two of those ruling civilizations that reigned over the entire chaos. There are 749 ruling civilizations. Zen smiled as he was told about this incredible piece of information. It seems that the number of ruling civilizations is a lot more than I originally thought, he said. Indeed, there are many ruling civilizations, the voice replied confidently. However, only some of them are strong. At the very least, our regal jade civilization is among the top 10. Zen didn't respond to this bold statement. Meanwhile, number 9527 seemed unconvinced. Really, the top 10? Asked the silent spectator. Why, what's wrong? Zen asked curiously. Humph, the regal jade spirit is only exaggerating, number 9527 sneered. The moment the regal jade bugs and regal jade beasts appeared, number 9527 already distinguished them as the civilization that once existed in the chaos. As a matter of fact, the history of every civilization and creature that ever lived on the other shore could be traced. Their movements could be located in the past chaos. As such, number 9527 didn't find much importance in the regal jade civilization. What are you trying to say? Zen seemed a little bit intrigued. The top 10 civilizations have all been recorded. Nonetheless, there isn't any record of the regal jade civilization being one of them. They remain in stage 13, which shows that they are not that strong. If they are really one of the top 10, then they should be within stage 32, at least. Answered number 9527 with much skepticism. After listening to what number 9527 said, Zen questioned the regal jade spirit. Well, since you claim to be one of the top 10 ruling civilizations, why do you stay in stage 13? The voice kept silent for a while. There was no point in keeping secrets about the regal jade civilization anymore. With that, it replied, it's because the 748th civilization is hunting us down. The 748th civilization. What kind of civilization is it? Zen asked. Once more, his curiosity was piqued. Hearing this, number 9527 was baffled. Even though it had a significant portion of its master's memory, it didn't have much information about the other shore. It's the Nihility race. They are the ruling civilization above us, the voice replied gloomily. It seemed to remember how awful they were. The Nihility race, the one that believes in the Nihility way. Zen frowned. Number 9527 once told him that a group of lunatics intentionally aspired to destroy everything in the chaos. They were convinced of the Nihility way and attempted to drive the chaos into oblivion. The Nihility race ranks 7th among the top 10 civilizations, said number 9527 gravely. It began to believe the regal jade spirit's claim. If what the regal jade spirit said is true, the regal jade civilization truly won't have a foothold in any upper stage of the other shore since the Nihility race is set upon killing them. In order to preserve the remaining glimmer of hope for our civilization, we have hidden our last hometown in stage 13. The Nihility race is not able to return to the Lust world. Even if they do come, they do not have the ability to kill us here, replied the regal jade spirit firmly. The chaos in which the Nihility race resided was destroyed and then you rose to power. Why did they chase after you? Zen asked the voice once more. The past chaos contained too many secrets. The more Zen knew about it, the more he felt like there were lots more he had not uncovered yet. It's very simple. During the era of the regal jade civilization, the Nihility race had almost destroyed the entire chaos. However, we put a stop to all of it, the regal jade spirit answered proudly. There were many other civilizations that followed after the regal jade civilization. If it weren't for their interference during that time, the new civilizations would not have existed anymore. The chaos would have been empty by now. In addition to that, we found a way to change the fate of the chaos, the regal jade spirit continued. It seemed very eager to talk about their civilization. A way to change the fate of the chaos. As he heard this, Zen became excited and asked, "Are you talking about the finale way?" "Yes," confirmed the regal jade spirit. "We have found some clues. You can find them all in the civilization artifact." Just as Zen was talking to the regal jade spirit, a dot of green light appeared in the illusion. It meant the birth of a new world. After countless cycles of annihilation and rebirth within the past hundreds of millions of years, several kinds of extraordinary lives were born in the chaos. The regal jade civilization was the most peculiar one among all of them. The members of the regal jade civilization didn't possess a body. The substance they were made of was jade. The dot of green light was the source world during the era of the regal jade civilization. It was also an incredibly large piece of jade. The images presented before Zen's eyes were rapidly changing. The jade world continued to expand as the chaotic energy continued to gather within that magnificent large piece of jade. In this world, there were a variety of creatures that were made up of jade. In contrast with the other civilizations, all the creatures in the regal jade civilization were united and cooperative. Wars within the same race were almost non-existent and development was remarkably fast. With a flash of green light, a jade creature appeared before Zen. The creature was a bird. Even though it was only as big as a fist, Zen recognized it at once. "It's the enormous bird that is sealed in the regal jade city," he said enthusiastically. "It's the Wing King." It's the first powerhouse in the regal Jade civilization to reach the other shore in the king of our civilization. There were certain courteousness and reverence in the way the regal Jade spirit uttered these words. Zen finally understood what he saw before. He was extremely shocked to see a gigantic bird sealed under the jade ground. Apparently, that giant bird was the king of a civilization. In Zen's era, even the strongest warriors of the super forces were of no match for the Wing King. These warriors included those from the Snake Goddess race, the Divine Farmer race, the Bearing race, and the Separate Abyss race. In an instant, the Wing King grew before Zen's eyes. From the size of a fist, it transformed into a gigantic bird. Simultaneously, the entire Jade world became even larger and more prosperous. The birth, beginning, resurgence, and destruction of the regal Jade civilization were all recorded in the civilization artifact, just as the regal Jade spirit said. In spite of this, a rebellion broke out during the most prosperous stage of the regal Jade civilization. The entire Jade world split into two groups. It started to collapse into the chaos of the battle that lasted for several years. The rebels were controlled by the people of the Nihility race on the other shore. They were the ones who truly incited the rebellion. The regal Jade civilization almost fell into ruin, revealed the regal Jade spirit despairingly. Hence, the Wing King also chose the finale way but failed. Zen asked inquisitively. Yes, he failed. The regal Jade spirit sounded a little regretful. He had been successful in finding the clues left behind by the first ruling civilization. He had also been able to find the way to realize the godly way's great unity. Ultimately, he still failed. The way to realize the godly way's great unity, pondered Zen. As soon as he heard this, Zen became interested even more. The final solution to the finale way turned out to be the godly way's great unity. Chapter 2911, The Instant Civilization. The godly way's great unity was the power source of the whole chaos. Everything in the chaos was formed by the way's blending energy. When the chaos was created, the way's blending energy was divided into 3,000 kinds of power, which were known as the 3,000 godly ways. A lot of powerhouses had mastered the 3,000 godly ways, but up until now, no one had been able to fuse them all to form the godly way's great unity. Even so, Zen did not give up the way's blending energy. However, in recent years, he had spent most of his time on the other shore and was too busy to attempt to fuse the godly ways. This nonsense again. The 3,000 godly ways have never been fused perfectly. I don't think they'll ever be fused. Number 9527 told Zen firmly. Zen questioned the regal Jade spirit. As far as I know, many people in the source world practice the 3,000 godly ways, but no one has succeeded in merging them into one. Even the chaos ancient gods who had observed the godly way's great unity and mastered the truths couldn't do it. The chaos ancient gods who had mastered the truths. Do you mean the sons of truth? The regal Jade spirit smiled faintly. The sons of truth were just some housekeepers after the chaos was created. The truths that they had mastered were defective. The truths were defective. How is that possible? Surprise was written all over Zen's face. No way. Nonsense. The truths are the most powerful forces in the chaos. How can there be flaws? Impossible. Number 9527 shouted defensively from within Zen, unconvinced. The reason why the chaos ancient gods were supreme in the chaos was that they each mastered an insurmountable truth that was above all the power. However, the regal Jade spirit actually said that the truths were defective. Naturally, it was difficult for number 9527 to accept. The regal Jade spirit sneered, I was a son of truth before, I had also mastered a truth. How could I speak nonsense? You had mastered a truth before. Zen's eyes widened in shock. Yes, in the era when the 750th civilization, also known as the Grand Sky Race, ruled the chaos, I was a son of truth, or what you call a chaos ancient god, the regal Jade spirit said calmly, as though this was no big deal. Once the godly way's great unity created the chaos, its energy had been completely depleted. Creatures born after the chaos was created would never have the chance to observe the godly way's great unity and thus could not become chaos ancient gods. No 9527's master was a creature of the last chaos. All of the grand nature treasures were passed down from the last chaos. The regal Jade spirit was born in the 749th chaos. After the 749th chaos was destroyed, all the energy was consolidated and fused into the godly way's great unity again. Then, the regal Jade spirit had a chance to study the godly way's great unity, enough to master a truth from it. Thus, it was able to become a chaos ancient god in the following chaos. The Grand Sky Race was also a ruling civilization. Zen had heard of it from the ear mice before, but he never would have thought that the regal jade spirit was a chaos ancient god of this civilization. Zen reflected on this for a moment. What did the regal jade spirit mean when it said the Son of Truth was nothing but a housekeeper of the chaos? But why are truths defective? Zen finally muttered. Although the regal jade spirit was an actual legend, he still felt what it said was unbelievable. The energy of the godly ways great unity they observed had defects, consequently, the truths they mastered were also defected, the regal jade spirit explained. Only the first ruling civilization had observed the perfect godly ways great unity. All the following godly ways great unity had flaws. It started to make sense, yet Zen still found himself shaking his head. What kind of civilization is the first ruling civilization? Zen asked. Chaos had been created and destroyed alternately, but it all started with the first ruling civilization. Naturally, Zen was curious about it. It is also known as the instant civilization, the regal jade spirit answered. The instant civilization? Yes. It only lasted for an instant. Then the whole chaos was destroyed, the regal jade spirit explained. A civilization, from its inception to its peak, would have to last countless years. However, this instant civilization had only existed for an instant. Zen rubbed his temples in utter confusion. The regal jade spirit, observing Zen's reaction, continued to explain, an instant passes in the blink of an eye for you and me. But for the instant civilization, it is eternal. Their concept of time is different from ours. Nearly half of the Sanskrit words were created by the instant civilization. You should have seen Sanskrit words as you entered the other shore by the truth of godly way. The Sanskrit words were created by the instant civilization. Zen repeated numbly. He had long known that Sanskrit words were spread from the other shore, but he didn't know who had created them, not until now. He never thought the Sanskrit words would date back to the earliest stages of the chaos. As Zen and the regal jade spirit continued talking, the pictures continued to slide. The regal jade civilization had been split into two divisions, and there was an extremely fierce battle. The majestic Wing King appeared in the battle, his wings fluttering with luminous colors. Zen was familiar with this colorful luster. It was exactly the way's blending energy. However, it was much fuller and stronger, and it seemed to emit an indescribable energy. Although the energy was tiny, he could tell it played an important role. Although he was just being presented with an illusion, Zen could still feel its massive power. So this is the perfect way's blending energy. Is this the godly way's great unity? Zen asked. He thought he knew the answer, but to his surprise, the regal jade spirit continued, we once thought that the Wing King had grasped the perfect way's blending energy, but after the regal jade civilization was destroyed, we realized that it was not perfect. If the Wing King had grasped the perfect way's blending energy, the 749th chaos ruled by the regal jade civilization would have lived on. It would not be punctured by that needle, and the finale way would have been realized. It was still not perfect. Zen exclaimed, at a total loss. No, the Wing King made up for one flaw of the way's blending energy. But there are still two flaws in it, the regal jade spirit said. So, we have been waiting for the right person to make up for the two flaws. And who is the right person? Zen asked curiously. The one who has our civilization artifact, the regal jade spirit answered bluntly. Zen glanced at Elvinia, who stood next to him. Her big eyes were bright and full of curiosity as she eagerly watched the colorful pictures that constantly changed in front of her. You mean Elvinia? Zen raised an eyebrow. She, the regal jade spirit trailed off in hesitation. Then it said, she can't do it. Chapter 2912, Identification. The regal jade spirit quietly observed the two humans that stood before it. Although the regal jade race was vastly different from the human race, it could tell that Elvinia was not suitable to take charge of the civilization artifact. We have been waiting for too long. It's not the first time that creatures have come to visit us over the years, the regal jade spirit sighed. The one most suitable to control the civilization artifact is not a purified being, but someone who cultivates the way's blending energy. You are not suitable for the role. So, please leave. The warriors at the other shore realm in the 13 stages of the Lust world were far from reaching the chaotic source realm, so it was impossible for them to take the time to cultivate the way's blending energy. Even in the source world, only top-level masters of the superpowers, like Fuxi and Chiyu, could master the 3,000 godly ways. The members of the regal jade civilization had been hiding in the Lust world, so it was impossible for them to find a suitable person. However, because they lived inside the regal jade city, they were immortal. It didn't matter whether the chaos was destroyed or created, the other shore would not be affected. Hence, they were in no rush to select the person they wanted. Buzz. The moment the regal jade spirit had finished speaking, Zen gathered the internal momentum in his inner world. A blazing white light shot out in front of the regal jade spirit. Is this the ways blending energy you were talking about? Zen asked with a smile. The regal jade spirit was taken aback. At a glance, it made an accurate judgment. 994 godly ways. You fused them. Yes, you could say that, replied Zen calmly. Zen had been continuously fusing the godly ways in the divine land. However, the more progress he made, the more difficult it became. Moreover, he had been busy lately, so he had failed to make further progress. However, the evil god had helped Zen a lot. It was easy for him to cultivate the godly ways that the evil god had fused, so he was quickly able to fuse 994 godly ways. Interesting. The regal jade spirit eyed Zen from head to toe. You are not a purified being. You stay in the dark region by eating darkness fruits, right? Zen nodded in reply. But a wild god is weak, the regal jade spirit said with a hint of regret. You are still not qualified. In the eyes of the regal jade spirit, the most suitable person was not only a purified being, but also a creature that specialized in merging godly ways. Although Zen had practiced the merging of the godly ways, his own strength alone was not enough. Moreover, compared to a purified being, the wild god was at least 2 levels weaker. Even though the regal jade spirit had rejected Zen, it suddenly released a cyan light that scanned Zen's body to assess his physical strength. Buzz. As the cyan light swept across Zen's body, the regal jade spirit gasped. How can this be? What's wrong? Zen asked, brows knitted. You haven't mastered the truth of powerful holy body. The regal jade spirit was surprised. What's going on? Although you are a wild god, you didn't cultivate the truth of powerful holy body. Then how did you get your body to the other shore? There were some exceptions in the world, and Zen was one of them. The regal jade spirit had thought that it had seen through everything, but now, it was obvious it had never seen anybody like Zen. Well, Zen scratched his head, at a loss for words. He could feel that his body contained a truth of godly way, but he couldn't tell what it was exactly. The strength of your body is far beyond that of a wild god, but not as strong as that of a purified being. The regal jade spirit wavered. All of the members of the regal jade civilization had sealed themselves up and fallen into a deep sleep. It could turn to no one for advice, and could only make the judgment on its own. If it were to give the civilization artifact to Zen, it meant that Zen would hold the core to the regal jade civilization. Needless to say, it had to be careful before making any rash decisions. Zen stood there in silence, waiting patiently. If it was anything else, Zen wouldn't have much interest in it. However, since it was related to the secret of the ways blending energy, he couldn't let it go. Especially since the regal jade spirit mentioned the 3 flaws, he needed to know if he could make up for them. I suppose I can give you a chance, the regal jade spirit finally said with a firm nod. You can merge with the civilization artifact. As soon as the regal jade spirit finished speaking, the chaotic void enveloping Zen and Elvinia disappeared. They returned to the high platform. The diamond-shaped civilization artifact emitted a green luster as it floated towards Zen. It was very clear that it wanted Zen to integrate it into his body directly. However, try as he might, Zen's body was unable to merge with the other shore token. To be exact, he didn't know how to merge the other shore token with his body. He said, I'm afraid I can't merge with the civilization artifact here. Can I bring it to the outside of the dark region? As long as he left the dark region, he would be able to return to the other shore with his soul. Among the 3 truths of godly ways he had been practicing, the truth of cultivation nature was left empty. In fact, Zen's purpose for this trip to the dark region was to merge another shore token with his truth of cultivation nature. However, his adventures in the dark region almost caused him to die. Sure, the voice of the regal jade spirit echoed from the civilization artifact. Zen then turned to Elvinia to ask her to activate her space ring. He was going to store the civilization artifact in it. Suddenly, shadows darted towards them in the darkness. Swoosh, 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 those black monkeys are here. Zen cried irritably. The black monkeys had been shocked at the discovery of the regal jade city. While the regal jade civilization was very little known, by instinct, they could tell that this was something extraordinary. Thus, they decided to wait and lurk in the darkness. As soon as the regal jade spirit lifted the illusion, the black monkeys rushed into the regal jade city and headed straight for the tower. Swoosh, 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 the golden Sanskrit words shone on the yellow paper plastered on the bodies of 3 black monkeys. With the reinforcement of the light, each black monkey moved with astonishing power and speed. The black monkey in the lead launched itself directly onto Zen, trying to yank the civilization artifact out of his hand. Elvinia, who was standing next to Zen, bared her teeth angrily. She hated the pig-faced monsters and the black monkeys instinctively. She remembered previously, those monkeys had chased them all the way to the valley. "Go to perdition," she screamed with a murderous look. As she raised her hand, a bright light shot out towards the black monkeys. Whack! She managed to strike one of the black monkeys. The yellow paper on its body burst into flames. Unexpectedly, the yellow paper had blocked the light for a moment. The black monkey rushed to Zen with flames. Bang! Bang! The civilization artifact was knocked out of Zen's hand. It plunged down from the tower. "It falls. We must get it." The other two monkeys ignored their companion and immediately leapt off the tower to chase after the civilization artifact. Chapter 2913, How Dare You? The civilization artifact plunged down from the top of the tower, followed by the two black monkeys chasing after it. Then, a hairy hand suddenly caught it. The owner of this large hand was a one-eyed monster, from another powerful force in the dark region. Hey, hey, the one-eyed monsters lurked in the dark, just like the black monkeys did. They had been observing everything that happened in the regal Jade City. When they watched the black monkeys rush into the scene, they too rushed over anxiously. They didn't expect that as soon as they entered the regal Jade City, they saw something, flickering green light, falling down. It was a sheer coincidence that one of their members caught the mysterious falling object. This one-eyed monster was overjoyed. In its excitement, it didn't even take the time to study the object up close. Instead, it just cried, "I've got it. Let's go." The rest of the monsters cheered and then followed closely behind. In no time, they dashed towards the outside of the regal Jade City. "Stop there, one-eyed guy, how dare you!" Watching the one-eyed monsters recede in the distance, the two black monkeys cursed in fury. The three black monkeys were the elites stationed in the stage 13 of the other shore. They had fostered a good working relationship with each other. But now, one of them had lost its life, only for their prize to be stolen by a herd of savage one-eyed monsters. How could they possibly be willing to accept that? Phew! Golden light flashed on the pieces of yellow paper on the two black monkeys. Jumping down from the tower like two shooting stars, they let fury fill their beady eyes as they chased after the one-eyed monsters. Zen, too, was furious. It had taken him a great deal to get his hands on that civilization artifact. But now, it had been taken away by others. "Elvinia, we must go after them." Dragging Elvinia by the arm, he leapt off the tower. Elvinia had little interest in the civilization artifact. She didn't even know what that thing meant. However, seeing Zen go after it like a madman, she felt like she wanted whatever Zen wanted. Meanwhile, the two black monkeys were steadily closing in on the one-eyed monsters. On a normal basis, the two groups were of the same strength. However, with the Sanskrit words written on the yellow papers, the black monkey's power was strengthened greatly. In just a few seconds, the two black monkeys caught up to the one-eyed monsters. "Fight them, now!" The one-eyed monsters weren't stupid. They could tell that whatever they had caught back at the tower was extremely valuable. They were definitely willing to fight for it. Two one-eyed monsters suddenly stopped running, and turned to face the monkeys. A strange symbol lit up in each of their eyes. Cut and lock. The third G of the one-eyed monster was all in the eye. As the symbols flashed in their eyes, the space in their sight was cut apart, forming a space cage that enveloped the two black monkeys. A space cage. Big deal. One of the black monkeys dashed forward. As it collided with the space cage, hairline cracks crawled around the walls of the space cage. In an instant, the cage was smashed with a loud bang. The other black monkey planted its foot on the shoulder of the one in front of it, and then launched itself into the air, kicking one of the one-eyed monsters with astounding strength. "Hand it over, or I'll eat you," a black monkey threatened. These black monkeys were extremely barbaric in the dark region and ate almost anything, including one-eyed monsters. No way. At that moment, a mysteriously colored halo appeared in the monster's eye. As the halo flickered, the black monkey stopped in its tracks. It seemed to be bewitched by the mysterious halo. While the black monkey was in a trance, the one-eyed monster tossed the civilization artifact to one of its companions. Just then, Zen and Elvinia caught up to them. Elvinia wrinkled her nose in disgust as soon as her eyes landed on these creatures of the dark region. Anger surging within her, she decided right then and there she would spare them no mercy. Great Sanskrit light. A ray of light circled around Elvinia's slender fingers. Zen had witnessed the power of the great Sanskrit light before. Although it had no effect on a creature like Zen who was not from the dark region, the great Sanskrit light could cause a terrifying blow to anything in the dark region. Just as Elvinia was about to cast out the great Sanskrit light, the civilization artifact flying in the air suddenly stopped. Stop! The voice of the regal jade spirit boomed, echoing in the air. It didn't say to the black monkeys and the one-eyed monsters, but Elvinia. Elvinia, however, didn't listen. Fortunately, Zen reached out and grabbed Elvinia's hand, just in the nick of time. Hold on, he said. The regal jade spirit was well aware of the terrifying power of a purified being in the dark region. An ordinary ray of light could even cause the regal jade city full of bumps and hollows. The great Sanskrit light could directly melt down a portion of it. Despite the fact that the regal jade city had the power to repair itself, it still would have taken a lot of energy to do so. Naturally, the regal jade spirit was quite anxious. The black monkeys and one-eye monsters were stunned. Of course, they never expected the civilization artifact would have its own consciousness. Who gave you the right to steal from the regal jade city? The dignified voice of the regal jade spirit boomed again. The black monkeys and one-eyed monsters, of course, knew that the regal jade city wasn't a place to be trifled with. However, they still scrambled to their feet in an attempt to snatch something. Just as the regal jade spirit finished speaking, the entire regal jade city seemed to come to life. Swish, swish, swish. Suddenly, various jade creatures emerged from the regal jade city, from regal jade bugs to regal jade beasts, among many others. Each of these creatures was a force to be reckoned with. A single regal jade beast had almost killed all the pig-faced monsters and even ate up the octopuses, which didn't have any predators within the stage 13. But now, hundreds of thousands of them suddenly emerged. In the blink of an eye, the two black monkeys and the one-eyed monsters were devoured by the swarm of jade creatures. Even Zen felt fear as he watched the city suddenly come to life with formidable beasts. Elvinia, on the other hand, watched fearlessly. After all, no matter how many jade creatures came for her, she could destroy them all with just a single beam of light. After finishing off the creatures from the dark region, those jade creatures glanced at Zen indifferently, and then melted back into the regal jade city, as though nothing happened. As soon as they had settled back into their original places, Zen approached the civilization artifact and picked it up. Didn't you say that all the members of your race have fallen into a deep sleep? Hump, they are not qualified to be regarded as my members, the regal jade spirit said indifferently. The regal jade spirit, after all, was once the son of truth, a chaos ancient god. Those it regarded as members of its race must have been masters of the chaos. Zen once again tucked away the civilization artifact into Elvinia's space ring, and together, they headed out. The two of them were walking along the road to the outside of the regal jade city, when suddenly, the ground beneath their feet began to tremble. Rumble. The huge regal jade city began to sink, and the black soil started flowing towards the center. Meanwhile, the black mud flowed back, forming a large, black pool. Chapter 2914, Expecting. The creatures of the dark region were all in a cold sweat after seeing how the black monkeys and one-eyed monsters ended up. They had planned to risk everything to rush into the regal jade city. But these creatures were not as powerful as the black monkeys or the one-eyed monsters. They couldn't just head inside, knowing how defenseless they were. All they could do now was to watch Zen and Elvinia leave. A single purified being was enough to defeat them, so they didn't dare chase after the two. The dark region covered most of the stage 13 area, with the extremely vast inner space. Initially, Zen thought about heading back along the mountain stream. But when Zen and Elvinia were chased by the black monkeys, they ran in a panic. After Elvinia destroyed a part of the mountain stream, they couldn't find the path they followed earlier. As a purified being, Elvinia could travel through the dark region safely. So long as she moved in one direction throughout, she would find her way out of there. After climbing over a small hill, Zen felt the darkness around him growing heavier. The darkness fruit's effect was about to wear off. Elvinia, give me a darkness fruit, Zen called out to her. Instead of doing so, Elvinia waved her hand, making a ray of light envelop his head. With a smile, she said, "You won't need any more of that fruit with this." The area the light covered was equal to the outside of the dark region. As it turned out, it was true that he didn't need to take the darkness fruit. Is it convenient? Zen asked. To be on the safe side, it was still better to take the darkness fruit. But Elvinia snorted and uttered, "If you don't want it, just leave by yourself." He gave her a helpless look in response to her childish outburst. Although Elvinia was clearly a little mad, she was still less aloof than she used to be. She was even rather cute. The two rays of light slowly moved in the dark region. Wherever they went, they enveloped anything under them, looking like sharp knives forcefully digging ditches into the ground. The plants in the dark region disappeared instantly under the light. The creatures of the dark region were shocked at the scene, so they hid themselves carefully and didn't dare breathe. They didn't dare bother Zen and Elvenia. If they did, they would surely be killed once the light touched them. Zen couldn't tell what kind of road they had chosen. After walking for over 4 hours, all he could see around him were uneven hills and mountains. When they came across the higher mountains, Elvenia didn't bother climbing over them. Instead, she let the light pierce right through the mountains, creating a cave at their foot. Hence, their journey went smoothly. The area grew more desolate as the two moved forward. Finally, they reached a great mountain standing at the boundary between the other shore and the dark region. Perhaps because of having stayed in the dark region for long, Zen felt that the light from outside seemed all too dazzling, even under the cover of Elvenia's light. Is it, the Grand Sky Temple? Standing atop the mountain, Zen saw something. It was the facade to the Grand Sky Temple. Having reached that point meant that they had traveled such a long way and ended up coming out from the other side of the dark region. Even after all the wrong turns they made, they finally found their way out. But right before leaving the dark region, Zen felt somewhat conflicted. Everything there was afraid of light as they were incompatible with it, they couldn't dream of existing in the light. Even the strong regal jade would melt like ice and snow in summer if it had to stay in the light. But because the regal jade was tougher and more solid than the rest, it melted relatively slowly. Elvenia had left many traces in the regal jade city. Although the civilization artifact could withstand the light Elvenia had released, it would perish under the light outside the dark region. Stopping for a moment, Zen took out the civilization artifact and expressed his confusion to the regal jade spirit. In response, the regal jade spirit uttered a single word, candle. The creatures of the dark region were hoping to obtain candles. On the one hand, they still wanted the light, and on the other, the candle served as the bridge between the dark region and the outside world. If Zen wanted to fuse with the civilization artifact, his soul needed to enter the dark region with the lighted candle. Fusing with the other shore tokens of the dark region required a dark environment. But, if I fuse with the other shore token of the dark region and put it in my inner world, won't my inner world's light make it vanish without a trace? Zen asked curiously. The regal jade spirit smiled faintly in response. Light is a form of energy. Even the light of the source world isn't at the high energy level or powerful enough to eliminate the other shore token of the dark region, let alone your inner world's light. So that's it, Zen nodded, a realization coming to him. It was not the first time he had heard of the energy level. In the Divine Land, the energy he had released with the Truth Crystal had broken Nicholas's fatal strike, ending up in his defeat. The Truth Crystal's energy level was way too high. In front of the Grand Sky Temple's main gate, a large crowd of souls of light were gathered. The last time the ear mice explored the Grand Sky Temple, they had lost quite a lot. Now, they didn't even bother holding the auction. This time, the members of the Bearing race intended to open the Grand Sky Temple. During the last conflict between Zen and the Bearing race, the latter lost several elites. They also lost the qualifications to enter the Grand Sky Temple. In the end, it turned out they escaped the dangers along with the Sun Crow race, the Divine Farmer race and the New Moon race. Now, it was time for them to stage a comeback. Apart from the souls of light of the Bearing race, the Divine Farmer race, the New Moon race and the Sun Crow race, everyone must leave, now. Hurry up, one of the members of the Bearing race shouted. Dozens of people laid the soul-binding threads on the ground nearby. The soul-binding threads covered the ground, looking like shiny blue grass. This time, there weren't many super forces taking part in the opening of the Grand Sky Temple. The separate Abyss race suffered great losses along with other powerful forces last time. Even though the ferocious Grand Sky Temple was tempting, not just anyone could explore it. Most of those gathered at the main gate of the Grand Sky Temple were the souls of light from small races. On the hillside opposite the Grand Sky Temple sat Dorothy, looking at the gate. She had waited like this for a long time. There were moments she saw Zen emerging from the temple, but she knew she was only imagining it as the door remained closed. This time, the Bearing race managed to obtain the other shore key of the Grand Sky Temple. If they opened the door, would Zen jump out from the temple? Chapter 2915, She was spotted. Although Dorothy knew that her wish was unrealistic and that there was a great possibility that she was waiting for nothing, she still chose to wait. Meanwhile, members of the Bearing race continuously arranged the soul-binding threads, and soon they reached the hillside. One of them glanced at Dorothy and remarked, "You have no business here. You should leave right now." If you get stuck to the soul-binding threads, we won't help you. Dorothy looked up at him and faintly replied, it's just to open the door of the Grand Sky Temple. What's the big deal? Even the ear mice didn't take precautions like that. Previously, when the ear mouse race opened the Grand Sky Temple's door, they only sprayed some soul-interdicting water and then arranged a few restrictions. But now, the bearing race was making a mountain out of a molehill. Humph, enough nonsense. Leave now, or we won't be so kind. A man from the bearing race warned her moodily. It would be troublesome too if she got stuck to the soul-binding threads, as that would make it difficult for her to leave the other shore. At that moment, Dorothy's heart was filled with resentment, but she couldn't do anything because they outnumbered her. She was too wise to confront them where she would obviously lose, so she reluctantly stood up and prepared to leave. This time, Dorothy chose to make a concession. Usually, souls of light would go their ways and would avoid interfering with others. After all, it was difficult to identify souls of light on the other shore, as they were all blurred in appearances. But one man from the bearing race had been observing Dorothy from head to toe. And when their eyes met, a glimmer of light flashed across his eyes. The day that the ear mice opened the door of the Grand Sky Temple, that man had also been present. He had seen Dorothy, as she fought with Hader and spent most of her time with Zen. Although he hadn't seen Dorothy's appearance before, he was sure that it was her, as she had the same figure, soul aura, and voice. In the battle outside the Grand Sky Temple, the bearing race had fought with the Oneness Sky Palace, and even before that, they had already fought against each other several times on the other shore. When the bearing race noticed the strong corporeal body of Zen, they began to make plans to end his life. They were confident that although Zen's body seemed invincible, and even if he had an upper hand against the souls of light, they could still find a way to deal with him. However, Zen never came back after he entered the dark region. And so, the bearing race had no choice but to sit tight and wait for their chance. Of course, it would be great if Zen had died in the dark region, but in case he returned from the Grand Sky Temple, the bearing race was well prepared for him. They were confident that the second he came back, would be the second he would die. Of course, the man from the bearing race had noticed that this woman in front of him was always following Zen's physical body. So now, when he saw that she was about to leave, he called out impulsively. Wait. Dorothy stopped short and turned to him curiously. What's up? She asked. As Zen had been trapped in the dark region, Dorothy had been dazed. She didn't notice that the man had realized who she was. Swish. Dorothy had barely finished speaking when a handful of blue soul-binding threads engulfed her until she was completely covered. She looked down in alarm and saw the soul-binding threads that were stuck to her body. Her face immediately contorted in anger, and she screamed, "What do you mean by this?" On the other shore, the acts of throwing things like the soul-restraining sand, the soul-interdicting water, and the soul-binding thread to others were seen as a declaration of war. She racked her brains for reasons why this man was going after her, wondering if she had offended any member of the bearing race. But even the rest of the bearing race had no idea what was going on, so they were also standing around, shocked and confused. As far as they were concerned, their companion shouldn't be stirring trouble, as they were at the crucial moment before the door of the Grand Sky Temple opened. The man suddenly shouted, "She is from the Oneness Sky Palace. The one that always followed the corporeal body. Hurry and catch her." All the people around them turned to look at Dorothy, who stared back at them, eyes wide in shock and horror. The bearing race was already planning to deal with the corporeal body, so when the members heard their companions shout, they immediately understood what they should do. It didn't matter that it was difficult to determine who she was on the other shore. Their companion was much more trustworthy than a woman they didn't know. Meanwhile, Dorothy was also shocked that she was recognized by that unremarkable soul of light. In a panic, she took a few steps backward and stuttered, I'm not from the Oneness Sky Palace." Quote. Her hesitant answer and obvious intention to run away aroused more suspicion from the other members of the bearing race. They immediately surrounded her, which effectively blocked all her escape routes. "If you're not from the Oneness Sky Palace, you could just explain. Why are you trying to escape?" The man from the bearing race asked ominously. Whoosh. The people from the bearing race suddenly joined hands and formed a huge soul net, enough to cover Dorothy's head. Dorothy knew that it would be more troublesome if she was caught by these people. She stepped back slowly, subtly trying to retreat, but the huge soul net was dashing to her. She gritted her teeth in distress, and the necklace of mystic soul that had been hidden under her clothes suddenly appeared. It vibrated strongly, and a small soul sword slashed straight toward the soul net and cut through it with a swish of air. At the same time, Dorothy's soul of light twisted and punched out from the crack. That's the soul sword, she used it to deal with Hater. Don't let her run away. She has been bound by my soul-binding thread. As soon as she pulled out the sword, several people of the bearing race shouted in alarm and recognition. They chased her with renewed vigor, and at that moment, she thought that she could never escape. They would never give up and let her go, and that thought discouraged her greatly. She cursed her luck quietly. She just wanted to wait for Zen there, but the bearing race recognized her. What bad luck. However, Dorothy had the necklace of Mystic Soul. It was an extremely powerful weapon that could aid in her escape, so as she fled, she activated her soul sword to counterattack. This sword contained astonishingly sharp energy, and the souls of light of the bearing race were well aware of its terrifying strength, so they kept their distance from it warily. Dorothy ran west and all the way down the hill, while more and more members of the bearing race chased after her. There were even members of the Sun Crow race, the Divine Farmer race, and the New Moon race that were following her. These souls of light had all reached the 13th stage of the other shore realm, so their cultivation was not much inferior to Dorothy's. They chased after her wherever she went, without the slightest intention of giving up. Dorothy cursed once again in her mind. At this rate, she would be caught sooner or later. It doesn't matter who you are, just surrender. Don't waste our time. We just want the body. If you help us catch the guy, we will let you go. You know you can't escape. Why don't you make this easier for yourself and surrender? Dorothy snorted at all the voices, then she taunted them confidently, let's see if you can catch me. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 small soul swords shot out from her necklace of Mystic Soul, and they flew towards the souls of light at an incredible speed, leaving white trails in the air. The 2 souls of light of the bearing race who had been talking to her were right on her heels. And because they were so close, they had no time to dodge the soul swords. Before they could scream, the small soul swords pierced them, and they were severely injured. She is so strong, be careful. The scene shocked the other members of the bearing race so greatly that some of them couldn't even talk. Instead, soundless gasps escaped their mouths, as they witnessed their members getting hurt. They were right to be surprised, as Dorothy's soul of light had already surpassed her peers. She had been able to compete with the top souls of light in the 13th stage with the help of the necklace of Mystic Soul. But although they were frightened by her power, none of them retreated. They stood their ground, confident that they were stronger because they outnumbered her. Thus, they persevered and trailed her. Chapter 2916, Into the Dark Region. Dorothy continuously activated the necklace of Mystic Soul, forcing it to its maximum power, as she retreated. She was heading towards the opposite direction from the entrance of the Grand Sky Temple. Up ahead, the dark region waited for her. Even though she knew she would die once she reached the dark region, right now, she had no choice but to keep running. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. She heard the little soul swords slashing from behind her. Suddenly, a clanging noise rung through the air. Dorothy, startled at the noise, turned to look over her shoulder. To her surprise, a shining golden hand firmly held the blade of one of the soul swords. The Golden Body Race. Dorothy felt her heart sink. While there were many native races in these 13 stages on the other shore, the Golden Body Race was one of the most powerful. The Golden Body Race looked very similar to the human race in both figure and height. However, the main difference was that their bodies were made of pure, luminescent gold. Consequently, they were much more powerful than other ordinary creatures on the other shore. To Dorothy's despair, the man from the Golden Body Race had actually stopped her soul sword with his bare hand. Clap! With little effort, the man of gold crushed the soul sword. Then, in a strange, tinny voice, he said, "Young human girl, you'd better stop resisting. I don't want to make things difficult for you, but we have agreed to help the bearing race." From behind the man, Dorothy could see dozens more of the Golden Body Race standing calmly. Dorothy's mind whirled. She was alone. Even all the souls of light from the Oneness Sky Palace in Stage 13 couldn't defeat so many creatures on the other shore. Even now, Dorothy was not concerned about her own safety. Desperately, she summoned another soul sword from the necklace of Mystic Soul. She had reached her limit at this point. "Why did you agree to help the bearing race?" Dorothy asked coldly, trying to buy some time. To persuade an entire race from the other shore to help another race, the reward must have been precious. However, it should have been impossible for the bearing race to be willing to pay such a high price just to deal with a little girl like Dorothy. "They have promised us great profits." The man smiled. "They have to hire people to deal with me," Dorothy taunted through gritted teeth. "You," the man sneered, "you flatter yourself. Why would we bother ourselves to deal with one pathetic soul of light? Ajay, quit talking nonsense with her. Just take her down. That man will definitely come to us once he hears the news. You don't need to wait here. The people from the bearing race said one after the other. At this point, Dorothy understood everything. Zen had destroyed the temple of the bearing race, snatched their soul crystal, and even killed Hader at the gate of the Grand Sky Temple. Naturally, the bearing race wanted revenge. They wanted to kill Zen. However, they were too weak to face Zen up front. They wanted the Oneness Sky Palace to hand Zen over, but the Oneness Sky Palace refused to admit that Zen was one of them. With no evidence, the bearing race was at a loss. They couldn't set themselves against the Oneness Sky Palace because of Zen. Too many things were involved, and they hadn't been well prepared. Therefore, they resorted to having creatures from the other shore do the dirty work for them. That would explain why the mighty Golden Body race was helping them. The golden man who went by Ajay stopped the chit-chat. Instead, he bolted towards Dorothy. Dorothy bit her lip. She knew she wouldn't be able to face Ajay head-on. She couldn't even face the Abyss Spirit race back in Stage 11, let alone a mighty creature from Stage 13. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The three soul swords shot towards Ajay. However, Ajay didn't even flinch. He stretched out his hand, and swatted the soul swords away, as though they were just annoying flies. Ha ha, Ajay chuckled. The swords barely even slowed him down. In fact, to Dorothy's horror, it seemed he picked up his speed. Without further hesitation, she whipped around and fled towards the darkness. She was now very close to the dark region. The dark region was a dangerous place for the souls of light. Even as she approached the border of the dark region, she felt fear welling within her. Candles. If only I had some candles. She could have temporarily hidden in the dark region, if only she had candles. But when the three-eyed boy let her go, she had given all the candles to Elvinia, who stored them in her space ring. Now, the Sun Crow race and the Divine Farmer race guarded the dark region from both sides. Behind her, the Golden Body race was steadily closing in. Just as she was only a few steps away from the dark region, she abruptly stopped. Young human girl, don't take another step, Ajay called. The dark region is very dangerous. Creatures on the other shore were forbidden from entering the dark region, too. The creatures from the light region were completely different from those of the dark region. Dorothy apprehensively took a few steps backward. As she got closer to the dark region, she also felt increasingly desperate. She knew that Zen was still alive, so she still held onto a glimmer of hope. However, if she was caught by them, they were bound to use her as bait to lure Zen out. If Zen managed to get out of the dark region, he'd have to face numerous opponents all at once, all because of her. What should I do? Dorothy turned around, facing her chasers. Ever since she met Zen, she had encountered many dangers on the other shore. However, each time, Zen had saved her. This time, now that he wasn't by her side, she knew she didn't stand a chance. Young girl, don't step back. You'd die, said Ajay. Don't worry, you won't die at our hands. After all, their goal was only to hold Dorothy as hostage till Zen showed up. They needed her alive. But I'm afraid that I'll suffer bitterly, Dorothy retorted, shaking her head. As she spoke, she took another step backward, toward the dark region. Are you sure about that? Ajay laughed. While Dorothy had been lost in her thoughts, he suddenly closed the distance and grabbed her by the arm. Dorothy snapped back to reality. Huh, wasn't he still a few steps away from me? Dorothy panicked. How could she have been so stupid? Suddenly, a white light flashed from the dark region. A hand reached out from the light and grabbed Dorothy, yanking her into the dark region. Phew, Ajay jumped back in surprise, letting go of Dorothy. He broke out a cold sweat. Dang it, he cursed. The others behind him shook their heads in disappointment. They never expected that this young woman from the Oneness Sky Palace would be so fiercely determined. They couldn't believe she was willing to run into the dark region just to escape their clutches. Chapter 2917, Leaving the Dark Region. What was that white light just now? A soul of light from the bearing race inquired in visible confusion. When Dorothy fell into the dark region, they had all witnessed a strong flash of light appear before their eyes. It was rather unusual to experience such a light in the dark region. Even though Ajay was from the other shore, he didn't know the answer to this question. They didn't know much more about the dark region than the souls of light. I have no clue, Ajay replied as he laughed spitefully. Since that little girl is dead, all we can do is wait. If that physical body is still alive, it will appear sooner or later. Ajay said as he clenched his fists with a vicious fighting spirit fuming in his eyes. The bearing race was willing to offer such a high reward that even the golden body race was unable to refuse. On the other hand, the description they gave of that strong body piqued AJ's interest. The golden body race was easily tempted by the thought of battling different mighty warriors, and AJ was no exception. Enveloped in the white light, Dorothy sat stunned on the ground. She was convinced she had not survived the fall. She didn't even understand how she was dragged into the dark region. Recalling back to what had just happened to her, she remembered taking a step back before she was wrapped in the rays of white light. Staring at the pure white light, Dorothy kept herself composed. Why didn't I feel any pain when I died? As she looked more closely, she noticed a person emerge from the white light. It was hard to make out the appearance under the influence of the overwhelming light. Even so, in a single glance, she had recognized him to be Zen. Accompanying Zen on the other shore for such a long time, she had kept his image in her mind. She could never mistake him to be someone else. But she kept her emotions in check even at the sight of Zen. She had heard that people would often hallucinate things that didn't exist in reality after they died. Maybe she missed Zen too much for her to see him in front of her like this. Still in a daze, huh? Zen chuckled as he walked up to Dorothy, with a sweet smile smeared across his face. He waved his hands in front of her jokingly. What? Dorothy was muddled. At this moment, she noticed Elvenia standing beside Zen. Instinctively her brows arched up in confusion. Why would she hallucinate Elvenia, even though she only had Zen on her mind? Moreover, she was able to see Elvenia's face as clear as day. She wasn't on good terms with Elvenia, then why was it that she hallucinated her of all people? Zen, is she stupid? Elvenia asked as she giggled while glancing at Dorothy's puzzled expression. Hearing this, Dorothy snapped out of her confusion and retaliated, "You're the fool." Dorothy was not inferior to Elvenia in any aspect when alive. And now that she was convinced she was dead, she wasn't going to hold her words back either. It fumed her how even now, this hateful woman had the guts to mock her. How dare you? Suddenly, Elvenia's face darkened as anger reflected from her expression. She gave her fingers a turn, and the white light surrounding Dorothy began to disperse. Considering her childlike tendencies, she showed no concern for other people's lives. If the white light were to disappear completely, Dorothy would be swallowed by the darkness and eventually die. Stop that right now, Zen said in a brusque tone. Taking notice of Zen's disappointment, Elvenia stopped immediately. She eyed Dorothy up with dissatisfaction as she pouted. Though her memory was impaired, she instinctively didn't like Dorothy. Don't be confused, you're not dead, you just fell into the dark region, Zen said as he offered his hand out to help her stand up. Dorothy stood up and began to scan her surroundings, still in a daze. Everything was so overwhelming for her that she took her time to process it all in her head before she spoke. Am I really alive? Zen, Elvenia, are you two okay? Zen nodded and gave her a warm smile. Don't worry, I was the one who drew you into the dark region. Stumbling upon Dorothy was really a coincidence. Zen had taken a long journey in the darkness before he saw the front of the Grand Sky Temple. Previously, he had been consulting the regal Jade Spirit about how to fuse with the civilization artifact. Just as he was putting away the civilization artifact, he had noticed a human soul of light being chased by other human souls of light along with creatures from the other shore. It was hard for Zen to make out who it was while in the dark region. Even so, he was alerted when he noticed the birds from the Sun Crow race. Since the Sun Crow race always followed the Bering race, he instantly concluded those human souls of light who chased behind were of the Bering race and the Divine Farmer race. No matter who it was that they were chasing, Zen had to intervene and foil their plans. In fact, Zen's theory was proven correct when he and Elvenia followed after the human soul of light only to find out that it was Dorothy. Quickly, they stationed themselves behind her. To make sure she was safe, he had pulled Dorothy in from the light region. After Zen briefed her about everything, Dorothy still stood stunned for a fair amount of time. She still found it hard to believe his words and said, "But how can you roam the dark region so freely? And this light doesn't seem like it's coming from the candles." From what Dorothy had known, they could only rely on the light coming from the candles to move through the dark region. At this moment, 3 rays of light simultaneously shot out from above their heads and wrapped itself around Zen and Elvenia. Such a technique was truly remarkable to watch. Zen glanced at Elvenia's profile and smiled. It's Elvenia's ability. Her ability? No, it can't be. Dorothy stared at Elvenia with her mouth agape. And she has a physical body. This is incredible. Elvenia now had a body in the dark region. Anyone could easily see her face and every feature except for the clothes she wore that were woven by rays of light. Dorothy couldn't process everything in one go. All this new information was too overwhelming for her. The matter involving the purified beings was too hard to explain at once. Zen didn't want to clarify everything to Dorothy just standing there. He gestured to her and said, "Come on. Let's get out of here. I think it's time to pay back those who chased you with interest." "No, stop." Dorothy immediately reached out to Zen and stopped him in his tracks. "They're from the Golden Body race. They are one of the strongest races of Stage 13, far more powerful than the Abyss Spirit race. They were hired by the Bearing race to hunt and kill you." "Are they really that strong?" Zen raised his brows, seemingly unfazed by her description. "Yes, they are." Dorothy nodded frantically to make him take the situation seriously. Previously, she had been worried about how she would be able to reach Zen in time to let him know about them. She had never thought she'd be able to meet him in the dark region. It all felt like a dream to her. Since Zen was capable of moving freely in the dark region, he could leave it when he wished to. Even after all her attempts to persuade him to stay, they were to no avail. Zen looked back at her and sneered confidently. "I'd like to witness this power for myself." As he finished his words, he took a step out of the dark region. Just like before, a ray of white light flashed through the darkness, and Zen had already made his way out of the dark region. Outside, Ajay had no interest to stay and study the white light. He turned to the members of his race and asked them to leave with him. Meanwhile, the souls of light of the Bearing race and the Divine Farmer race were engrossed in a heated discussion on what the light indicated. The white light didn't disappear. They were still able to make out a faintly visible white shadow through the darkness, but they failed to figure out what it was supposed to be. At this moment, the white light became brighter and brighter with time. Suddenly, they all saw a person emerging from it. The human souls of light that stood fascinated by the view, were left shocked. They yelled in confusion and started to retreat frantically. With confident steps, the person approached them and said with a smirk across his face, "I heard that you were waiting for me in front of the Grand Sky Temple." Ajay, who was preparing to leave, turned his head when he heard the voice from behind. As soon as his gaze fell on Zen's physical body, he was unable to take his eyes off of him. He tilted his head and began to study it carefully. Human, blurry face, an aura that was different from that of the souls of light. Ajay immediately believed this person to be the corporeal body the Bearing race had told him about. Chapter 2918, The Limit of the Light Region. "It's him. He's actually escaped the dark region. Back off." Zen's physical power was no secret to the members of the Bearing race. He'd even bested the mighty hater. Zen smashed the man into dust when he hit him. His foe was not strong enough to defend himself. The souls of light were like ants to Zen. He could squash them underfoot without half a thought. They were too weak to stand a chance against him. The souls of light retreated one after another, while the members of the Golden Body race, led by Ajay, came forward. "Not them," said Ajay, looking at the fleeing souls of light in disdain. "It's me that was waiting for you." Zen looked at Ajay. The Golden Body race was truly worthy of its reputation. Ajay's body was made of gold, and it was obviously extremely strong. "I have no quarrel with you. If this is about the Bearing race, you might want to rethink this." "You can't defeat me," Zen said in a low growl. "Ha ha ha." Ajay rested his chin in his hand, and his grin became even wider. "So arrogant. I'm from the other shore, and outsiders aren't even worth mentioning in my eyes. You're doomed." With that, he suddenly stretched out his arms, and the muscles rippled under the pure gold. A powerful aura emanated from the figure. When the other members of the Golden Body race saw this, as one they all let out a deafening cheer. They were going to hang back. Ajay could defeat Zen all on his own. He didn't need their help. Sensing Ajay's strong aura, Zen soothed his soul and remained calm. He smiled and said, "Actually, I have a question." Ajay stared at Zen and asked, "Oh really? And what might that be?" "If you are willing to become an Other Shore token, how much Other Shore power can you release?" Zen asked. A living creature could also become an Other Shore token. No doubt, they were much stronger than ordinary Other Shore tokens. But those tokens would lose their freedom. They had to work for their owners. That was absolutely humiliating. When the wild gods found the Other Shore, they often enslaved the inhabitants, like the Golden Body race, and made them into Other Shore tokens. But the denizens of the Other Shore had become more powerful since then, so only the weakest of them could be enslaved that way. Ajay's face darkened at Zen's question. He clenched his fists and said angrily, "You will know after our fight." Whoosh! Ajay stomped his foot, making a loud sound. The ground cracked and split open. A golden vortex encircled his fist. He swung at Zen. "Okay, I admit it. You're not weak," Zen said as he raised his eyebrows. Since the Bering race wanted him dealt with, they concocted a thorough plan. They were sure that the Golden Body race could help them achieve their goal. Seeing that the Golden Vortex punch was aimed straight at him, Zen quickly thought of the best course of action. As his right leg thrust out, his body tilted forward. In this way, he skillfully avoided the punch. When he stood up straight again, he grabbed AJ's neck with one hand and lifted him up. Bang! Then, he released him. As Zen turned his back, AJ fell to the ground hard. The impact caused the ground to recess, and a pit was formed. In the middle of it lay AJ. Zen stood at the edge of the pit and waved his index finger at AJ. He pointed at the dark region and said, "Consider it as I've already killed you once. Since you had the courage to challenge me alone, I'll grant you an extra life." Zen stood on the precipice of the dark region. He could easily throw AJ into the dark region just now, but decided against it. No matter what, they made it a fair fight. The other members of the Golden Body race could have jumped him, but they didn't, so he spared them. But Zen's sense of fair play only incensed AJ. To be beaten and spared was an even greater dishonor for a warrior of the Golden Body race. He didn't want Zen to go easy on him, even if it meant death. "Ah!" AJ roared as he leapt to his feet. He used the power of his aura to leave the pit and rose in the air. He landed near Zen. He roared, reciting a series of mysterious, ancient words. The golden vortex surrounding his fists became even brighter and more powerful, and his body was faintly shrouded by the shadow of a golden hammer. This golden hammer was extraordinary. It used to be the most powerful weapon when the Golden Body race was at the height of its power. Not only that, it was intelligent. It was not only a supreme master of the Golden Body race, but an object of worship for that race. A look of surprise appeared in Zen's eyes when he felt AJ's power increase. To face it head-on would end bad. He used his footwork to quickly retreat. Bang, bang, bang. AJ kept throwing punches, but Zen managed to dodge each one. Every time, AJ's fist struck the ground, and it cracked under the mighty impact. It was now quite treacherous in that region, and one wrong move would send a man sprawling into a mighty chasm. The Golden Body race was indeed more powerful than the Abyss Spirit race from stage 11, but their power was limited. AJ should be one of the best of the Golden Body race, but he could only release 600 to 700 divine megatons of force. Such a force was strong enough to deal with the souls of light, but it was not even remotely powerful enough to defeat Zen. Zen did a quick calculation. The ultimate power of the light region of stage 13 on the other shore should be under 1000 divine megatons, while the power of the strongest warriors should be nearly 1000 divine megatons. By comparison, the dark region was much more terrifying. The three-eyed boy and the huge ape could unleash thousands of divine megatons of force. AJ was about as powerful as a black monkey. Besides, there were octopuses and regal jade creatures. AJ attacked continuously, extending the battleground by at least 1,000 feet, as Zen kept retreating. Roar, 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 why do you keep avoiding him? Retreat is not an option for a warrior. Coward. The members of the Golden Body race cheered AJ and mocked Zen. They thought if AJ hit Zen, his terrifying power would mash him into a puddle of goo. But Zen was so quick that AJ couldn't harm a hair on his head. Hey, guys, why don't you gang up on him? You promised our race, don't you remember? Quote. Watching the battle, the people of the Bering race grew quite anxious. They felt that it was too difficult for AJ to take down Zen alone, so there was no need for a fair fight. They'd have their pound of flesh, even if they had to be considered shameful. However, the members of the Golden Body race were all about integrity and honor, so they didn't care about what the Bering race suggested. When there were few places left to stand, AJ was finally exhausted. He'd cloven away most of the solid ground. He stood and gasped. Zen grinned and said, "Now it's my turn." Before AJ could react, Zen had transformed into a gust of wind and rushed toward him. Zen was weak in the dark region, but in the light region, he feared no one. Bang! Zen flew straight at AJ. At the last minute, he led with his elbow and struck the warrior full in the chest. The blow seemed weak, but it was actually massively powerful. Before AJ could react, he felt a dull pain in his chest and had been flung backward. Chapter 2919, The Light. While AJ flew backward, Zen followed him, and timed his next punch just right. AJ tried to regain his footing, so he could stop himself after being knocked back. But Zen's punch stopped him from doing that. He tried to catch Zen's fist, but Zen altered his fist's trajectory and hit him in the face. If it were any other creature, this punch would have shattered its skull. However, AJ's bone structure was dense. He was fairly powerful, so Zen kept hammering away with his fists. Dong! Dong, dong. With 3 strong punches, Zen smashed Ajay into the big pit at the precipice of the dark region. But the golden body race was indeed tough. Even though he'd taken a lot of damage, Ajay's breath control was unaffected. But, no matter, they knew who had won this time. Ajay said dejectedly, I admit defeat. Zen looked down at him in the pit and said, you're not worth the trouble it would take to slay you, I'll spare your life, this time. A serious look suddenly appeared on Ajay's face. He said, you are a brave man to defeat me. Makes me sorry I have to do this. I respect you, but I promised the bearing race you would die. As soon as he finished speaking, a golden bone appeared in his hand. It looked like a rib. Then, without another word, he plunged it into his chest. Howl! A dazzling golden light burst from Ajay's eyes, and his momentum soared once more. So engrossed in what was going on, the members of the golden body race took a bit to notice something strange. The 6 members also held golden bones. They stabbed these bones into their chests and roared. Their momentum went sky high as well. The golden body race was one of the strongest races of stage 13. Not only did they have the golden hammer, they also had 22 golden battle bones. Before the chaos where they lived was destroyed, the hammer transformed them, so they all possessed a golden body. The hammer was certain it couldn't escape the disaster, so it disintegrated its body. After that, it sent its arm and leg bones and ribs to the other shore. Once the golden body race stabbed themselves with the golden battle bone, it would give them great power almost instantly, but only for 5 minutes. When the power boost wore off, they would die. Ajay would honor his vow, even if it killed him. He had promised to kill Zen, so he used the golden battle bone to achieve this goal. This time, though, he had backup. He made a deal with some other members. If he couldn't handle Zen, he would use the golden battle bone. And the 6 who followed him would do the same, and gang up on Zen. Surely he couldn't handle them all. Whoosh! Ajay only had 5 minutes to live. No matter what, he would kill Zen in this period of time. He jumped up and tried to hit his opponent at an astonishing speed. Zen's eyes widened in surprise, but he still dodged to the side almost reflexively. Ajay's punch only grazed him, but left ugly, bleeding slashes where it screamed past him. Zen narrowly evaded Ajay's attack, but the other 6 members of the golden body race had already surrounded him. These 6 were weaker than Ajay, but with the support of the golden battle bones, they could not be underestimated. They could strike with the force of 1,000 divine megatons without breaking a sweat. If Zen used the Shade Stone liquid, he might be able to survive this. But he didn't have it on his corporeal body on the other shore. That was why he was noticeably weaker. If one of them landed a blow, he might be gravely wounded. And he faced 7 foes. Things were looking grim. Haha, looks like that guy will finally die. We can't fail now. The golden body race is indeed trustworthy. I think Ajay can take him now, especially with 6 of his buddies. When they saw Ajay lose to Zen, the members of the bearing race were depressed. If the golden body race couldn't take this guy out, then maybe no one on stage 13 could. Was he invincible? They didn't expect things would change in the blink of an eye. And they were happy to see it. Once Zen was killed, they would be able to leave the other shore and report this good news to their elders. In the dark region, Dorothy was filled with anxiety. She wanted to leave the dark region and rush to his aid. But Elvinia wouldn't let her. She was trapped there by her circle of light, and Elvinia refused to budge. So how do we fix this? Zen may not be able to beat them, Dorothy said anxiously. Elvinia blinked, but he said he could handle it on his own. Dorothy glared at her. She had a feeling Elvinia was not in her right mind. Certainly she was different from how she used to be. And now Dorothy had a sinking feeling she was correct in her assessment. Anyone could see that Zen was in danger. How? 7-on-1, he's going to die, Dorothy shouted angrily. Elvinia finally understood what she meant. She raised her eyebrows and repeated, going to die. This aroused worry for Zen in her heart, and she started walking to the edge of the dark region. Hey, take me with you, Dorothy yelled hurriedly. Take you with me? Why, you seem pretty useless. Elvinia took one last look at Dorothy and rushed out. Dorothy was in the form of a soul of light. She couldn't help Zen in that form. She was no match for any member of the golden body race, much less any who had thrust the golden battle bone into their chests. Members of the bearing race, the divine farmer race, and the sun crow race, all souls of light themselves, were cheering from a safe distance. The remaining members of the golden body race wore a sad expression. 7 members of their race were going to die, no matter whether they beat Zen or not. Just then, they saw a figure walking out of the dark region. This person was not the soul of light who had previously entered the dark region, but another woman. Who is she? Is she from the other shore? Or the dark region? She's a human. What a stunning woman. She's the hottest girl I've ever seen. Elvinia was clad in clothes woven of light, her long legs bare. Her delicate features had a touch of innocence. Everyone could feel her aura, an aura of a unique and extraordinary charm. She drew everyone's gaze, from the bearing race to the divine farmer race. But she was about to stun everyone with what she said next. Her voice was loud and clear as she addressed Zen. I'm here to help you. When the warriors who were busy surrounding Zen saw Elvinia, their faces darkened. Was this woman a denizen of the other shore? Or did she come from the dark region? None of those combatants were happy. Then, everyone saw Elvinia gently wave her finger, and an ethereal voice rang in their ears, saying, Great Sanskrit light. Buzz. A thin light column spread to engulf everything, and the environment turned incandescent. Everyone was blinded by this. Their surroundings, and everything in their vision was a bright white. When the light dissipated, their vision returned to normal. The souls of light from the bearing race, the divine farmer race and the sun crow race were still shivering, while those from the golden body race looked confused. The bright light was indeed astonishing, but it did not harm anyone. That woman shone her light on others. What kind of theurgy was she using? Chapter 2920, The Power of the Purified Being. The souls of light of the bearing race, the divine farmer race, and other races eyed each other up from all directions to find that they were not injured by the strike. Although the light gave off an intimidating vibe, it lacked the required potential to cause significant harm. In a state of confusion, Elvinia stared hard at her palms to make sense of the situation. This isn't the dark region. Zen reminded her with a morose expression etched across his face. The light released by Elvinia was a form of energy. Instead of harming the creatures of the light region, it was aimed at the dark region. As a result, the beings of the light region remained unharmed. Unfortunately, when Elvinia unleashed her light, Dorothy and the dark region were unlucky enough to be caught in the crossfire. The light made its way behind Elvinia and caused a mountain in the dark region to be reduced to dust. Even though Dorothy was under the protection of the light, the mountain below her feet crumpled to the ground and caused her to fall. Fortunately, the beam of light quickly responded to her predicament. It enveloped her vertically and protected her. Is this woman serious, or is she joking with us? Does she really believe she could kill people with her insignificant light? It's laughable. Such a waste of a pretty face. She's practically brainless. Once they realized Elvinia's attack was powerless against them, they regained their lost vitality and began to taunt her. Not wanting to give Zen enough time to concoct a strategy, Ajay and the others attempted to launch another attack towards him. Overhearing all the mockery directed to her, Elvinia tilted her head and asked indifferently, brainless. As she said this, she made her way towards Zen with a dark shadow hovering over her face. When she was only a few feet away from him, she gently tapped her snow-white feet on the ground. As a result, the ground was unable to withstand her strength and cracked under pressure. At the same time, the speed at which she flew in his direction increased considerably. Whoosh! She became so agile that it was difficult for anyone to read her movements. Within a split second, she had caught up with the members of the Golden Body race. In an infuriated state, she reached out her hand and grabbed a hold of one of them. The adrenaline rushed through the body of the Golden Body member due to the stimulation of his Golden Battle Bone, which made him launch numerous frantic attacks at Zen. Suddenly, he felt a bone-chilling touch on his shoulder. As he turned to look, he saw it was Elvinia's hand. Before he could react, he felt a frightening force coming from her hand. It was so powerful that he couldn't resist it with his Golden Battle Bone. He began to lose consciousness and was directly thrown into the dark region. Sizz. The creatures of the light region were restricted to enter the dark region. Even though the Golden Body race were proud owners of insanely durable bodies, they would still perish in an instant when exposed to the darkness. As a result, his hair, bones, and flesh were devoured completely. They manifested themselves into mere black smoke. The only thing that remained to vouch for his existence was the Golden Battle Bone. Although the Golden Battle Bone was not to be underestimated, it was only a matter of time before it would perish as well. The Golden Battle Bone deteriorated at a slower rate compared to other items. At first, the surface of the bone would turn a charred black color, and then it would develop bumps across it and break down into pieces. And lastly, the many small pieces of bone would be destroyed and disappear in the dark region. Swish, swish, swish. As Elvinia continued her ruthless actions, more and more members of the Golden Body race were thrown off into the dark region. Each of them faded away quickly and became a distant memory. Elvenia was not as forgiving as Zen. Since she was slow to reinforce, Zen was under siege the entire time. When the sudden realization hit her that these people intended to kill Zen, she was engulfed with fury raging in every fiber of her being. Her only goal was to annihilate all the guys who flashed a golden light. The guys from the golden body race have such low resistance. I don't think that's the case. This woman is just too strong for them. Dang, this woman is really in a league of her own. The souls of light of the bearing race were left dumbfounded. Initially, they were amused by Elvenia's tenacity to retaliate. However, they never expected her to come out with such formidable strength. In a blink of an eye, she had tossed 6 members of the golden body race into the dark region. Only Ajay remained. The moment the golden battle bone was pierced through Ajay's flesh, he would only have 5 minutes before he breathed his last. In the last few moments of his life, he seemed rather calm. The strength of the human woman that came out of the dark region was too overwhelming. Ajay knew there was nothing more he could do, except to accept his defeat. Even if he risked his life, he would still fall short of completing his task. Stop, I'll do it myself. Ajay stared Elvenia in the eye and gestured her to halt her attacks. The members of the golden body race held the golden battle bone with high regard. For so many years, they had only lost one. However, when Elvenia tossed 6 of their members into the dark region, their golden battle bones could not be retrieved. As a result, they had suffered a loss of 6 bones in one fell swoop. All members of the golden body race fell into a crippling depression. They valued the golden battle bone more than their own lives. Elvenia glared at Ajay with bloodshot eyes as she yanked Zen behind her. It was as if she was a hawk protecting a chick. After Ajay walked over to the edge of the dark region, he pulled out the golden battle bone from his body. Then with a swift move, he threw it towards the members of the golden body race. When the golden battle bone was inserted into his body, it fed off of his life force and became a part of him. If it were to be pulled out, he would instantly die. When he disposed of the bone from his body, he had used up all his leftover energy. As a result, he fell backward lifelessly and got consumed by the darkness. Where is Dorothy? Zen glanced in Elvenia's direction and asked. Elvenia had no concern attached to Dorothy's life. Since Zen was the one who inquired about it, she replied in a casual tone, "Don't worry. She's still breathing." After she finished her words, Elvenia went into the dark region to draw Dorothy out. Ajay had fallen, and the remaining members of the golden body race had given up on the thought of confronting them. With careful hands, they picked up the last surviving golden battle bone and retreated. "It looks like you haven't learned your lesson after the last time I destroyed the temple of the bearing race," Zen said with a sullen voice. "Do you want me to go back and destroy your temple once more? Which temple should it be this time? Should it be the bearing races, the divine farmer races, or the sun crow races? What do you think about that?" Initially, when Zen had stayed in stage 4, he had planned to tear down the temple of the divine farmer race. But then he let them go. However, if he were to return to stage 4, destroying 2 temples at a time wouldn't pose much of a challenge for him. The location of the temple of the sun crow race was still unknown. But he was convinced he would find it in stage 4. Those souls of light could retreat from the other shore at will. They were in no hurry to run away just yet. After hearing Zen's threat, the souls of light shook with fear. When Zen destroyed the temple of the bearing race last time, they had suffered an incalculable loss. The warriors of the bearing race were given strict orders to kill Zen at first sight in stage 13. Even so, they secretly hoped they didn't get a chance to encounter him. They had pinned their hopes on Zen leaving the Lust World, upon passing stage 13. As long as Zen stayed in the Lust World, the bearing race would not be able to turn the tables in their favor. "Humph, if you even think of touching our temple, we will tear down the Oneness Sky Palace." A man from the bearing race mustered up the courage to throw the threat back at Zen. "Yes, if the Oneness Sky Palace were destroyed, your life would become the living example of a stray dog," a member of the Sun Crow race said. "You can only act as tough as you do on the other shore," a man from the Divine Farmer race uttered. The Oneness Sky Palace had never pronounced Zen officially as their disciple. They also expressed their unfamiliarity with him on many occasions. However, all of this had proven the fact that the relationship between Zen and the Oneness Sky Palace was special. If the situation were to get out of hand, the bearing race would attack the Oneness Sky Palace. None of you gets to decide when the bearing race would attack the Oneness Sky Palace. As Zen spoke, he shook his head disapprovingly. He tossed a stone upwards with his toe and reached out to catch it. With a gentle force, he crushed it into minuscule particles in front of them. So don't talk nonsense right at my face. Now, get out of here before I change my mind. With Zen's strength, if he were to throw these particles at the souls of light, he could crush them in an instant. Witnessing a tiny spectacle of Zen's power, the souls of light were stunned. They didn't dare stay a minute longer and rushed away all at once after reciting the illusion-breaking rune.